Fingernails down a chalkboard, that's a different frequency. They know the frequencies on how it behaves. But those are super incredible low frequencies, you know. We're talking to the gigahertz frequencies that literally affect the electrical impulses across your neural net in your brain. This is where they've mapped it down to and what they've installed with the frequencies in the 5G grid. This is how they're going to control everything. You're hungry?
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
You're going to ride with the police?
Right back.
We'll just turn the frequency differently. We're going to take a break here. I'm your host, David Dubine. Mini Ice Age Conversations. Studio A, Revolution Radio, Thursday nights, 10 p.m. to midnight. We're back in 2 minutes, and we're going to continue on our discussion. Talk about the grand solar minimum and the workings of the deep Rubicon.
We discuss important topics, and we do our best to be apolitical. So I invite you, put on your favorite pair of comfy sweats, your smoking jacket, and grab a beverage of your choice, and join me Thursday evenings at 6 o'clock for This, That, and the Other on Revolution Radio.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
From the astral realms to the physical plane, the halls of power to the walls of home, the multiverse to the innerverse, all will be haunted by the ghost in the machine. I am Steve Zerloff, the ghost in the machine. Mondays, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Studio B, exclusively here on Revolution.Radio.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
When your doctor tells you you have bad cholesterol or blockages in the arteries, what do you do? When diet and exercise is not enough, we try medications and hope for the best. For the last 2 decades, I have been telling people about a natural method to help solve these problems and more. Extendovite can help maintain cardiovascular health and lower blood lipid levels in adults. The 7 herbs in Extendovite are known to work together synergistically to get the results we hope for. There are many testimonials on Extendovite's effect on circulatory-related ailments. Get Extendovite today to start your journey back to a healthier life. To order, call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com or see us on amazon.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
And welcome back for the second hour of Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David Dubine. FreedomSlips.com, Revolution Radio, every Thursday night, 10 p.m. to midnight. And if you had joined me for the first hour, it was an exciting first hour coming back from the conference in the UK, and I was talking about just how the world, in my view, has absolutely, I know nothing, and it's shattered on the new information I have received about the new integrated EU army, about how the occupation forces are set to control North Africa, which is greening and going to become a new food grow zone. And if you'll excuse me, I'm going to make some coffee right here. Hope it does turn on. There we go. Easy, press and go. See, the world that you think you perceive and you know, there's a whole greater, deeper layer of onion that is out. And I'm really taking a huge step back because I thought I knew about the grand solar minimum and I thought I knew a lot about it. But after going to that conference, I realized I only know a very small amount about one little thing comparatively to the whole of what's truly happening across the planet right now. In terms of reasons of the positioning and the chess pieces of our society being moved around and integrated. And they kept coming back to Deagle.com. They couldn't figure out what was going on, why all these number changes in the populations and economy. Well, it seemed to be figured out that somebody in power already knows these changes for the grand solar minimum are here, and they're positioning themselves as well for continuity of government and continuity of conquest. Continuity of conquest. The occupation of northern Africa is going to be a vast task. There's been almost no army in history that's controlled North Africa. You know why? Because the people who live there are absolutely strong. And they've seen colonialization for hundreds of years. I don't think they're going to accept it again. But they're very strong, very proud people of their culture and their identity of each individual African nation. And when I say strong, I mean strong fighter. Physically strong as an ox, mentally strong as an ox as well to prevent occupation from a foreign power. This is why armies throughout history have never been able to occupy and conquer a unified northern Africa, except perhaps the Romans. And if you look back in the Roman warming period, you'll find that they grew grains across northern Africa. Still do to an extent, but not the extent that they did in the period of Rome, 400 AD, just prior to the late antique little ice age. They'd expanded agriculture pretty good, but it started to get real dry. Then they lost that crop grow zone down there. I'm going to say circa, from like 250 forward, it was really getting different. Dry. I'm going to say dry. In history, there's been armies that have controlled northern Africa, but they've had a very difficult time being there just because those guys are so tough. They're so rough. I mean, they're so strong, those African guys. But where are they now? Where are they now? They've been removed as the resistance out of North Africa, given free tickets to Europe, and they left their crop growing zones wide open for occupation. It was a brilliant plan. How did you get the strongest resistance fighting force on the planet out of its home turf? You give it free stuff. And you get them out there, and they went voluntarily. They demilitarized themselves voluntarily. North Africa did. And now when these areas become the most verdant grow zones on the planet, which they are currently, there'll be no resistance there to go in and just take the food and have locals work for you while they're growing food. And you're taking food out of the country as an export. Who would do that with all the investments? Oh, China and Europe, great. But think about that chessboard move there. That was checkmate, what they did. They checkmated the strongest army resisting on the planet for thousands of years. Checkmate right then. They no longer have a defense force in northern Africa Because all the guys went up to Europe for free. They depopulated the defenders. They didn't send them to gulags or concentration camps and line them up against walls with machine guns to get rid of the resistance. They gave them free Nikes, and they ran to it. And a free stipend in Norway, and they ran by the millions to get money. They depopulated the resistance force out of Africa. And now the UE Integrated Defense Force is heading down to Africa to occupy it, and they're going to start the draft. Isn't that coincidental? Now the pieces are starting to fit together for me. And I was thinking, you know what? I learned all these things about Integrated Defense Force where they're going to rip down the EU into just a single overseership on a 24-hour rapid response force. And also they're building an entirely new highway network system within the EU, and it's on track. And get this, it was another, my jaw hit the floor. The highway system, which we're so used to, the expressway system in the United States, that was built for the military as a rapid response anywhere in the United States. They could send an entire army to anywhere in America within, 24 to 48 hours. They just closed down all the expressways, and the entire army heads 4 lanes down in one direction. And at 55 miles an hour, you can cover an enormous amount of time because all you do is switch drivers and nobody takes breaks. You just keep going. 24 hours a day at 60 miles an hour, day and a half, and you're in California. So pretty much around the United States, all 4 lanes can just zoom in one direction with the military. Well, they don't have it as such in the EU, but they are now building it and have been, and it's required. So all these new roads are like, damn, thanks. Why are they putting in all these new freeways? We already had a really good one like the M1 motorway, but they redid part of it. All over the EU, for example, they are building to a new spec and code very similar to our own expressways to send rapid response forces 24 hours across Europe anywhere by road. This is to quell the dissent that we're seeing just like France. And it's going to be over food. No ifs, ands, or buts, man. Hands down, absolutely. The puzzle is so cleanly fit together. I sit here and I'm trying to figure out even how to put pen to paper. And I'm so happy, and thank you for letting me ramble tonight, because these are all the thoughts that are in my head from this previous conference I went to in London that I got out of a few days ago. I was a speaker for Alternative View 10 with the X for the Roman numeral X. And what the speakers there that are all European-centric, I was the only foreign guy. Oh, Deborah Tavares was another speaker there. She and I were the only 2 Americans that were speaking there. Oh, Benny Wills as well, but he was performing a little bit different. Benny, hey, shout out. Good performance, by the way. It was a way to explain the world through poetry, dance, and performance. He and his girlfriend whipped up something on the political edge and spectrum, but done in a theatrical type of way. It was well done, the integration on that, too, combining seemingly unrelated types of, specialties around. There's dance and theater, that's its own, and then you got the politics mixed in with it. Everybody there was EU-centric, so to see what I saw over there just blew my mind wide open about the plan for the EU is a new king rising, just like the similarity and interestingness of it all is we've seen over these last decade the rise of Xi Jinping in China to the levels that haven't been seen since the last emperor, Pu Yi, but he was pretty much just a puppet pawn. We need to go back to the Ming Dynasty to find the first, what I would consider emperor, as you know, the classic emperor of China to have wield that much power and wield that much power over the kingdoms and the warlords and the fiefdoms, like that kind of, when you say emperor in the 16th century, and you understand that meant 100% control. Whatever that individual said went. The EU is setting itself up for the exact same thing. One person as the new king. Whatever they say, that order follows to the following of the death, literally. Just like it was in the emperor. You didn't have emperor's orders, man. They would torture you terribly on your way out to send a message that you do not disobey in any way, shape, or form, from one iota, or you're killed in a horrible way. EU is setting itself up for the exact same thing. They're going to have one leader, unelected, no less, no officialdom, no elections. Are you kidding me? It's an appointed leader. To then give orders to an appointed military commander, not elected, just installed. And everybody keeps talking about, whoa, we need to look back in history in World War II to see something like that again happening. So now it's two places on the planet that are trying to get into this all-powerful single individual seat of power, returning us back to serfs in kingdoms. Or just serfs across serving the emperor in China, peasants. They're putting the old power structures of 400 years ago back on top of us again. You are the peasant, you are the serf. You shall obey with 100% allegiance to the new European United Defense Force and the European integrated. You have no more sovereignty. You obey Europe. You're a European citizen. Obey Europe. Tell us of your sins. You have 2 minutes. Watch 1984. It's scary the way they're coming down to this total dictatorship across Europe as well, with this much power centralized in one hand. And that much power overseen and controlled by one person that has total overseership of the military in a unified fashion. One person, unelected. And if you don't obey in the military structure and chain of command, which will be a unified force, there will be no army, there'll be no military or Air Force or Marines. It'll be just one unified force of a military in one country. And if you don't kowtow to the orders, then you're just replaced because none of them are elected anymore. And so that's the whole thing moving forward in Europe. Nobody's ever elected to any of these positions. So the military commanders of each individual country, they're appointed. And they kowtow to the next, your EU Integrated Defense Force commander. And if you don't obey, you're just removed and they put somebody in who will obey. They're unelected. They're appointed. And of course, they're going to appoint the person who's going to absolutely execute every single order without question, including turning on their own EU citizens for protesting and just taking part of the army in another part of the EU and going in and cracking some heads open and occupying entire North Africa. This is the scary part. Where does that bring us with the food? I want to bring you over to Electroverse here. This whole unelected thing going back and bringing us back 400 years in time is a little scary too. Of how he's brutal to the serfs. And they just gave the keys to the kingdom away. They came in, the EU, it's going to be good for integration economy. Ooh. The EU can't even do its own metal anymore, can't even do its own steel. Can't make its own airplanes, can't make its own boats, can't do fishing, has to rely on massive taxation enforced by the EU. I thought it was going to be so good for everybody. Because a lot of people I talked to were Exeters. They wanted to get out because they explained, I don't want my son going to the draft in North Africa. Why isn't this on the national news? Why are they talking about a fishing boat versus talking about our sons getting killed in North Africa to occupy it? This is what they're not talking about in the news over there. And they're trying to squelch voices that are bringing up these very same things. Why is it all related to food right now? I want to bring you over to Electroverse. They have a new post up here. Physically, the latest start to spring on record for much of the United States. Agricultural consequences in the grand solar minimum. If I could talk, I'm still jet lagged. Now I'm in Denver for LeakCon 2019, beginning these next 2 days, the next 3 days rolling through the weekend. I'll bring you updates, live updates as we go through the weekend talking with different individuals. And I'm hoping to glean as much information as I got out of the EU conference that I went to, because, man, I am so shocked on how this all fits together, like the neat integrated puzzle piece that it is. So they have this amazing map, and I highly encourage you. This is one of the best. I'm actually going to pull this out to use my. So if anybody's listening and you're coming to LeakCon, I'm going to pull this map out of here and put it into my presentation, because I feel this is so important to show the true state of what's happening with our agriculture. Everybody on the planet is going to be looking for new grow zones, and this was forecasting the grand solar minimum. And they said, well, it's going to, and I have been saying for years that it's going to affect our crop grow zones, and this is the reason that so many governments are posturing. And I got final confirmation on this weekend. But then here is another nail on top of the nail. This is a mini nail on top of a large nail that nailed the last coffin shut, because it's been so nailed shut that we need nails inside nails now because there's so much proof. And here's another one. This is the most stunning, well done map here. It is called the leaf out map. And so if you're going to look for this, if you're listening here, it is called the leaf out map. Now, what leaf out means, when spring starts and they start to see leaves on the trees. And it's broken down by color. The greens are, if it was earlier than normal. And the purples and the dark purples and that kind of shade of purple, opposite of green, very easy to see the difference on the map. The darker it is, it comes up to the latest spring on record. Or if it's incredibly dark green, it'll be the earliest start to spring on record. But I only see, and there's some interesting things here. California and Oregon. California and Washington State as well. So on the map, I'm looking at Oregon and Washington State, and it is the latest spring on record. Now, this makes sense because the accounts and reports from the potato growers up into the Idaho area are that they've had the worst potato growing planting season ever recorded. Now, you have to realize that the United States in that area, particularly doing massive agriculture, is not, a 500-year record, so we can really see what's going on. We can go back a good 120 years. But we can go back way further in Europe. So the amount of information we can glean from this map is a good, 120, I'm going to say 120, fingerprint into agriculture, into America. So we can at least see the latest spring record, in the last 120 years is occurring predominantly across the west coast of the United States. In the central heartlands area, it looks like Kansas there, right around that Kansas, Oklahoma, panhandle of Texas area is the latest spring on record as well. And as you drift north, there's a lot of, later, 38 days later than normal. And then you get into that kind of range up there. Right? The greenest areas where it's the earliest spring on record, Cascade Mountains in California. So just north of there, up in Oregon and Washington, it's the latest spring starting on record. But literally 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 miles south, you come into the Sierra Nevada mountains, 1,000 miles, but you come into the Sierra Nevada mountains, earliest spring on record. And that has to do with all these new arc storms. Because the National Weather Service, I don't know if you're familiar with this, we're all familiar with how they rate categories of, tornadoes and hurricanes. But they have the same rating category system for arc storms. I didn't know if you knew that. These are those, masses of moisture bunching on, and then they turn into the rivers. They're very discernible, easy to spot rivers in the sky, and then they, dump over California coastal, and they call those arc storms. Well, they just added a new band to the arc storm, like Arc Storm 6, Category 6 arc storm. So this would make sense, the map I'm looking at, because the arc storms are becoming ferocious, so much so that they're adding a whole nother level of it. Like, hurricanes, they're trying to say, because of global warming, we need to add in and try to get a Hurricane 6, Category 6, because of climate change, because of CO2. So you see it across every weather reporting network. They're trying to even get, tornadoes rated at a higher rating of an EF6 because of climate change. global warming. So we see it everywhere. So they want to increase the intensity scale of a tornado. They want to increase the intensity scale of hurricanes, and now they want to increase the intensity scale of arc storms. But here I am looking at this map, and it's shocking. I mean, earliest on record, California, Northern California, Sierra Nevada mountains. Latest spring on record, Washington, Oregon. It's right where the new increasing category arc storms is. Do you think it's related? Yeah, me too. Now, when I look over the map here, a majority, I would say a good 3/4 of the map is trending toward the purple's side, meaning late. So I would say a good 3/4 of the U.S. would be late. Maybe 2/3. Well, I'll be conservative. A good 2/3 of the map is late spring. And remember, if you're going to look up this information, it is called the leaf out map, and then you can find the average spring. And again, Marquette, I talked about Marquette, Michigan in videos at least 2 times this spring. The amount of days that they have not been above 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and also the amount of snow that was on the ground. So these 2 times, and here's Marquette, Michigan again, breaking the longest streak of 70 degree Fahrenheit below zero. Anyway, there's nothing to see here. No relationship to the grand solar minimum. And then I look down on the next post where it shows that same map, and right in that Marquette, Michigan area in the northern Great Lakes, and it looks like just up in Vermont area, also latest spring on record. So you're getting in the periphery areas of what were demarcated as the grand solar minimum temperature drop areas in the Maunder minimum. So if you go look for temperature reconstruction map of the Maunder minimum, you're going to see the exact same. And I mean it eerily, spookily, hair stands up on your arms, similarity to where the cold was during the Maunder minimum. It's just not coincidence, not by accident. This is happening. And again, the cold, prairie dogs. I'm here in Colorado, and I had a chance to walk around today, but I'm at the edge of where they're building, where I'm staying right now. It heads out into more open field areas. So I went out to walk in the fields because the flowers are quite stunning here. I mean, the wildflowers that are coming are incredible, just full, incredible sheets of yellow and white, and like tall white flowers, shorter white ones, yellow. It's incredible. Different kind of vegetation. So I went out for a little hike, not even a hike, just a walk. And I came across these prairie dog things that I'd never seen before. I thought they were gophers or something, right? But bigger. And they make these massive mounds across flat fields. And they make a squeaky sound like when you're coming around, so then they can warn the other ones. But as soon as I saw this information here, this year's severe winter killed all but one of the prairie dogs at the zoo in Madison, Wisconsin. Yeah. And then we take a look at these areas again that had dropped in the Maunder minimum, and we know for sure that Europe's cooling in. Dalmatia, I've been to these places. Croatia, coldest start to the month of May since records began. Now, they say 1948 on the record here when official records began. But you got to be kidding me. Croatia has like 4,000 years of history. So their records, I'm sure, stretch back beyond 1948. I went to Croatia, too, over the holiday of Christmas and New Year. I took an enormous amount of photos, which I have not shown anybody yet, which I should. But down there, there's an old, ancient civilization that worshiped the sun. And the cities there that are 2,000 years old are built on top of other cities that were older. And I know for sure some of the cathedrals that I went to had the most advanced architecture. And if they were building in the 1600s, it would have been the most advanced architecture ever. even in the 1600s, that was somehow just, it was that good on top of another prior cathedral base that was some thousands of years prior to that. So out of place history building, if you will. Croatia is deep with history. And I'm sure they have the cycles further back than 1948. But officially, it's the coldest start of May ever. And when you look at it, it's about 30 degrees Fahrenheit below the normal temperatures across a predominant area of, it looks like the Balkan area there. And Slovenia, too. New York City Central Park breaks a 105-year-old cold record, 20 degrees Fahrenheit below normal. But I bet they have global warming protests as it breaks a 105-year-old cold record. You start to see these movements hijacked across the countries of our worlds, where in the UK, they have a whole climate movement going on called Extinction Rebellion. And they're having the kids, like the shock troops that we saw in Nazi Germany. I should say more Mao's China. That would be a better description. The shock troops from Mao's China went in to re-educate their parents first, because they were educated in the schools that they need to re-educate their parents. This is in the Cultural Revolution. That they used the students to enforce their norms onto the parents, and if the parents didn't kowtow, eventually the children would be used to inform on their parents, just like Mao used the students to go ahead and enforce the actual edicts of free speech. Oh, where are we seeing that? Oh, across everywhere online. You talk, student protests, they're the ones forming what lexicon you can or can't say. Didn't come from high above, but it's allowed to go on. So climate rebellion over in the UK, and then we have the student movement here. I even forget what it's called in the United States, where they had all the students walk out of those days in class. Every student walked out for climate. I would have stayed in and wrote on the board 100 times, I love CO2, I love CO2. CO2 is plant food. You know how I remember when you were younger and you got in trouble and you'd have to write something on the board 100 times or whatever? I would have said, all right, you guys go out and march, and I'm going to stay in the classroom, and I don't believe kind of what you're doing with this thing. So I'm going to stay here, and I'm going to write some stuff on the board 100 times, okay? CO2 is plant food. CO2 is plant food. We love CO2. And they would have come back from marching out on the streets being all climate active to see my blackboard covered with CO2 is plant food. And I wonder how they would have reacted. Would I have had ink poured on my head like they did in the Cultural Revolution? I wonder. But you can see the same things in history repeating, how they're now using the children, and I can see it. They're going to use them as the shock troops, just like they did in Mao's China. And also the removal of history. It continues in the UK. It continues in the United States. They need to break down your history before they can rebuild out this new society. And they have to break down everything that exists in a country first before they can integrate this one world government, one world thought process, one passport for the planet, whatever. They got to break down all your norms and traditions and everything you've ever believed before into nothingness. And see, that's the whole thing I don't get. One thing I did get, everybody at the conference in the UK was awake and aware. That's what they don't want you to be. They want you to be awake and aware. That's fine. But once you start organizing people in awake and aware, you're dangerous. But if you're awake and aware and you're a Democrat and you're awake and aware and you're a Republican, they still want you to fight and try to continue to have you fight along these political lines. What they don't want you to do is bond on the basis of being awake and understanding that what you're seeing is full control over the human race on this planet with terraforming. They do not want you awake and aware. They want to divide you as far as they can. And, they've done such a good job at it. They brand you on socioeconomics, religion, what kind of car you drive. There's just so many things that they brand you as, and they try to dissuade discussion and bring you apart, like, ooh, you shouldn't talk to them, they're bad. Ooh, don't talk to them, they're too poor. Ooh, talk to them, rich people are bad. But what if all those same people are awake? They just don't want you talking to each other to spread your awake and aware ideas. Because awake and aware people are now becoming dangerous because they're spreading information that sounds interesting enough for other people to look at it. I'll tell you, when I talked, I had about a solid 200 people were like, wow, totally makes sense. And I kind of was looking for answers, but you filled in a lot of answers that I was looking for. And about 50 of the other people said, you know what? I don't really agree with it, but it's the first time I've ever heard this, but I disagree with it at this point, but it's so interesting that I want to do some research on my own to see what it's all about. And that was awesome to agree to disagree, but it was so nice that even though they disagreed at the moment, they're like, it was interesting enough and new enough of information that it could possibly make sense. But I'm going to look into it more because I never heard that end of it before. And that's where we need to get at, is sharing this type of information, because what I learned in the EU conference filled in a lot of boxes for me and filled in a lot of blank parts on the canvas for myself. And then what I realized at the culmination of that is they want us divided as much as they can as a human on any level it can, because once you become awake and aware, they lose their control. Because they're terrified of the 5G resistance network awareness campaigns in Ireland, of all places. They don't want people aware of what's going on with 5G. How is this network going to give you faster? All these people are now getting together that they're awake and aware of a situation or something going on. This is a detriment and a fear for the corporations as well as for the governments, period. So I call on everybody today to please come back together. Forget whatever you are, forget what you are for a moment, and become looking for the awake and aware person without all the labels and extra layers of society paintbrush strokes on top of them to define that individual. Forget all of that. Just jump in and look for the base core connectedness of we're awake. That's the people we need to come. That's the conversation we should have. Not about if this guy is government or if this person is really in control of the citizen breakaway rebellion in a country. Whatever it is they're talking about doesn't matter. The core base is our understanding that something more nefarious is on the planet and we need to organize against it and really start raising awareness to the rest of the citizenry that there's some nefarious stuff going on and it needs to be taken care of right now. There's no more time. There's not even another day to waste on getting this 5G awareness out there. This awareness of the grand solar minimum on how it's going to affect our food production areas, how integrated armies are now going to go occupy. If the average person knew just what they knew about the grand solar minimum and then they added in what's going on in Europe to occupy northern Africa, I think things might change a little bit, because it's too scary to get their sons and daughters to go off to war to occupy North Africa. But it's going to be sold as something else. And they're going to continue to have you fight and argue and bicker about your politics and your religion and football teams and any other thing in the way. Don't fall for the trap. They want to divide you because the aware people share information. And the further we go down this rabbit hole, the more they're going to get into these wilder stories and more Hollywood-esque type of things, and the blocking in social media and the narrative that will not be allowed to be shared. This is where we're going down the path. If it's in the EU and they have China on lockdown with the new Emperor Xi, and we're going to get a new lockdown, new king of Europe, where's the next logical place? And Australia is gone already. It's borderline unelected. Even though they are elected, that place is running on a whistle of its own, kowtowing to something else. The Australian citizens have no rights anymore. Their vote is worthless. It's so bought and paid for in Australia as well as to kowtowing to the global movement to a one system of taxes and overseership and military. So Australia you can count as another one. How many other Western nations are left that aren't kowtowing into a one single individual, unelected, controls that country? Yeah, pretty much the United States, huh? This is why you see a lot of what's happening. They want to disarm the public because everywhere else this ploy has worked has been a disarmed public. They're terrified to come to America. They're terrified to try to implement these in America because they know it just won't go through. The Americans will stand up, at least enough of us will stand up to say no to this global fascism of this one world army, integrated defense force of each individual continent, kowtowed and given to, bequeathed to the new kings of the globe. We are the resistance. We're the last of it. Everywhere else has fallen. I seriously had my mind shattered going over into Europe to see what was happening. We are the last of the free continents that are not being overseen by a dictator at the moment. Count yourself very lucky to be where we are with some of the rights we have. I know so many things are being eroded at the moment, but we got to come back together as an individual thought of we are awake and aware. We need to explain it to others. Once they take your guns, you die. Anybody who resists across Europe is now going to be invaded and taken over by the EU Defense Force. China's on the land grab. They're looking for lands everywhere. EU is going to be on the land grab looking for North Africa. China's going to be there too. What's going to happen when China and the EU lock horns on food grow zones down in Northern Africa that they both are occupying with their armies? What happens then? Who shares the land? How do they split it up? It's planned right now. And their whole plan on timeline, and this is the quirky thing too, they want to have everything but their timeline for complete integration and complete finishing of the highways, integrated militaries, no more Air Force Marines across any country in any EU zone. It's all just one unified military force that then is kowtowed or bequeathed to the overseership of the non-elected general commander. But all their plans need to be completed. Their timeline must be done by 2023. Absolutely, they have to be done 2023, not a minute later. But this all goes right in with my whole solar forecast with Valentina Zarkova and everything else of 2023 and 2024 is when we're going to see the most massive first wave of crop losses that are going to it's going to rip apart the threads of our society due to rising food prices and the food riots through the cities. And you can see why this rapid rollout of 5G is so integral right now, that they're willing to cut down millions of trees, of old-growth trees across the entire UK to roll this thing out. Like, they are terrified of the citizens coming together. They are terrified of you having your own free mind. And they are rushing to get the highways in Europe finished so they can rapid response the military to take down other people who are rioting within the EU over food. And they're going to occupy North Africa, and they're by force cutting down trees to get you into this control grid that's going to control your mind. This 5G, man, it is so succinct right now, and everything's on the same exact timeline of 2023. So for me to have all these forecasts going out for the grand solar minimum of 2023 to 2024, and the first, real shock to our society. We're not going to, this is it. We go down, we're on our own again. You're going to see there's going to be a complete fracture and ripping of our society in 2023 to 2024 with the food prices and the food unavailability and the discontent amongst the citizens and the police firing on their own citizens with live rounds to control them and armies coming in to control the citizens because they'll be so angry with the food crop losses and they won't have food for their families. This is what's coming on the same timeline. It's all centering around 2023. We'll know for sure by 2021 what's happening with the food, but as I just perused through Electroverse tonight, Everything is about records. Here's another one. Winter-like record pattern grips the northeast United States. Cold records tumble. 40 degrees Fahrenheit under the normal. 35 degrees Fahrenheit. 30 degrees, 25 degrees Fahrenheit below normal. Northeast U.S. That matches right up with that late spring grow zone map I showed you there. It's the same woods up in the Vermont, New Hampshire area, northern Pennsylvania. So it's happening again. As we peruse through this first year here of, well, the food crop losses are here. This is the first full year that we're going to experience it. You're going to have to take very good account of what's happening with the losses in the crops right now, because next year it's going to be worse. And next year, it's going to be worse again, but exponentially worse than this year. And as we roll out into, let's say, 2021, this is where I envision, and a lot of others envision, that the first shocks come to the awareness of the populace that we're in it. And their lives are going to be forever changed, because they're all going to wake up and understand this is a multi-decade event. This is not a year or two and then we return to normal. It is a multi-decade event. Once the awareness of that point is out there, that it's a multi-decade event, the food is going to be less from this point forward. The shift is, I need to get more food right now. I hope it spurs people to massive action and put up vertical grow tubes and get gardens started and, just take the bull by the horns for self-sustainability, but I don't think it's going to. What it is going to do is create a massive panic. And if the food crop losses are in 2021, as I envision, then your food, if you're listening to this today, will be between 2 and 3 times higher price. And if we look back through history, like I did include a slide on my presentation at Alternative View 10, I showed that the food prices from 1755 to 1800 across Central Europe rose between 2 and 7x during the very lean harvest years. But then when the weather would sort of normalize and it would get normal harvest back, the food prices would normalize again. It would come back down to the base or even dip lower than the original food price spike. And then we have, a couple, 2-3 years of good harvest, and then it would spike again because of bad harvests. And I was trying to explain in the chart, you please understand, the grand solar minimum, they're trying to shatter the movement from within the grand solar minimum by pointing and saying, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. Within the community, those guys say it's solar cycle 25, the grand solar minimum will start. They're wrong because the other guys say it's solar cycle 26. Those guys are wrong. So they're trying to break apart the narrative of the grand solar minimum at this time. I think it's being an infiltrated message because it's gaining traction to explain the message. '21 is going to absolutely show us where we stand with the food crop losses. I believe that's the rollover wake-up year. That'll be the 100th monkey right there. And when that happens, we are into a forever changed world. And please get that straight right now. No ifs, ands, or buts. This is going to be a changed world we're entering. And the world is posturing for the change already. If you're not, you're way behind. You're going to have to start to catch up real quick to what's going on and how you can protect yourselves and your families, especially coming into food growing. You're going to have to grow your own food. You are absolutely going to need to grow your own food. I was saying that originally, but after going to Europe, you're going to die if you don't grow your own food is where I'm going to leave it at. It's not going to be enough for everybody. And they're going to control it through military. And they're going to use live rounds to take down citizens. And they're going to use the 5G carrier wave to incapacitate you if you're rioting or demanding food. They are going to put a wave into you to make you sick and drop to your knees on the carrier wave within the 5G network. That's why they need it rolled out so fast. They need it coverage. They need it covered across the United States. Every developed nation gets this. By 2023, they want to envelop the entire country. not only of ours, but the UK, Ireland, everywhere. But I'm so happy Ireland is the reason. Please, Ireland, stand up. Show what this thing is. This is a control grid for the masses that are going to be behaving differently because of food shortages. Nothing more. That's the only way I can describe 5G to you. It has nothing to do with telecommunications. It is a control grid. That's what I'm saying. My eyes were so wide open. I didn't really get it until I got it. And now I'm so happy that I understand it. I was so blind by just the grand solar minimum. I didn't see all the integral workings of how it's going to couple on top of each other, how this thing's going to run through and how they're going to control everybody. Vineyards across Europe. This was another thing that was talked about during this time when I was at the Alternative View 10 conference just a few days back. The vineyards across Europe are lighting all their torches to try to save the vineyards from record-breaking cold yet again. I thought it was the warmest year ever. This was predicted in the grand solar minimum. These same spots, France, Germany, Austria, Maunder minimum, they lost part of their wine production. And here we are again. New grand solar minimum, Eddy grand solar minimum, they're losing a vast majority of their wine production. This is the canary in the coal mine right here. The first things to go back then as well were the vineyards and the wheat fields in Germany and France. Too wet. They got ergot and it got really moldy. So what are we seeing again today? Losses to floods in Germany and France. Oh, ergot. The reason I mentioned that is because the French couldn't sell their wheat to Egypt because the ergot content was too high. It's the exact same thing we saw in the 1600s. It's all matching up in the same exact places. Then we got the states really late with the springs in the exact same places. We got armies on the move, chessboards being filled up right now. Saw the same thing. People are posturing for food grow lands. So what depths and what lengths are these governments willing to go to keep themselves in power as these 8 billion people vie for a very limited resource called food in the future? It's not something you can do without. Sorry, you can't do without food. It's life or death. It's a life or death commodity. And there's not going to be enough of it for everybody on the planet. And by 2021, that thing that you buy every day that is called food that keeps you alive is going to double in price or triple in some places. But please be aware and keep that back thing in the back of your head. Keep it in the back of your head. The food prices, although they rose 2 to 7 times in the bad harvest years across Europe in the late 1600s through up to 1750 or so. When the food prices spiked, they spiked for 1 to 2 years, possibly 3 in some long runs, if you will, and then they dropped back down. So assuredly, the global warming crowd will hijack that drop in food prices as another confirmation that global warming is going on. I'm really curious what the carryover stocks are going to be for grains, because I'm so happy I downloaded and screen grabbed and saved everything that came out for the grain reports for the U.S. Department of Agriculture grain reports. I saved all that for the last few months or back in the beginning of the year because I want to see what the carryover stocks are, because America lost 30% of its grain stored. Other countries are looking for more grain. They're running around looking for grain when they couldn't buy it themselves. So I want to see how much of a drop there is in the carryover stocks that they have globally, because what they had it as was 230 million tons of extra in the silos, if you will, which is down from 700 million tons just a few years ago. When you go back 5 years, there were 700 million tons of carryover stock, that literally extra food that we had on the planet. But now that dropped to 250. So I'm wondering where the extra 500,000 tons went to. Where did it go? And I'm even more curious how it's going to drop further because of all the losses we're seeing globally. And, I got a report from the Ural Mountains here. Again, that's a grain grow zone because after I gave my presentation, a guy walks up to me, nice gentleman, says to me, my brother is working up in the Ural Mountains, and they're in this agricultural, they're in the agribiz, if you will. And he said that the fields were delayed in planting due to record cold and snows in the Ural Mountains as well. They're far, far behind planting in the Ural Mountains. But this is a major grain grow zone for Europe. India is having all types of terrible difficulties at the moment as well. India. So there's really not one place on this entire planet that's not being touched and affected at the moment. So it's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when your food prices are going to start to rise. And then the next step beyond that is, what is the rollover point where food gets too expensive and people start writing or visiting, calling, whatever, their elected officials to ask what they can do to help on the food prices? And then what's the next rollover point where the bottom economic strata of countries, let's say the bottom 10% will be conservative. Bottom 10%, the food assistance is no longer enough for them to support their lives because of the rising food prices and the unavailability of a lot of foods. At what point do they become more violent, wanting more change, start protesting in the streets, demanding that food be given to them and their babies, which is happening right now in France, of all places? I can't believe it. And then what point does that finally roll over into people start looting supermarkets, or people just straight up facing off, stopping food trucks like they're doing in Venezuela, but in the United States? Like, what's the progression going to roll out as such? Because you've already seen what's going to happen in Venezuela. If you've been at all keeping up, you've seen that slow progression. It didn't happen overnight. The lack of food didn't happen overnight. The unavailability of supplies didn't happen in a single day. It was a slow transition from what was available, what was freely available in terms of food and product, but a slow trickle. It stopped. One day you couldn't get meat. One day you couldn't get shaving cream. One day you couldn't get napkins. One day suddenly ketchup disappeared, whatever. But there was still other stuff. It didn't go to zero and screech to a halt in a single day. Let's say that. So as we move forward, too, look at the timeline of Venezuela. How did they go until now? They're eating rotten garbage and they're selling rotten meat, and they're fighting with the government because they don't have enough food. At what point, how long did that take them? Because they were an isolated spot, right? They're very isolated. Around them, they know that the rest of the world has food, period. We'll leave it there. This time, when it comes to be a global event with the grand solar minimum dropping in the agricultural production, when we look out to see other countries that don't have food too. It's not, the perception is going to be very different. Venezuelans look out and go, oh, Colombia, they have food. If I can get there, they got food. If I get to the United States, they got food. Hell, if I even go to Thailand or anywhere in Asia, they got a lot of food. But when we get down to, 2021, 22, 3, 4, and 5 going in, that danger zone, that's my danger 5 years right there. 21 to 24, let's say my danger 3. I'm going to call the danger 3. When we look out as a society, the rest of the world, we're going to look back. They don't have food to give us either. That's even scarier. Maybe I should buy more. Oh, there's not any left. Now what? There will be no relief from this. They're already planning for the unrest. I got my final confirmation in Europe. That's good and bad at the same time. Big changes are upon us, that's for sure. Anybody listening, I highly encourage you, please look into 5G. And if they're going to come, and if you have a chance to go out to the community meetings to ask about what they're going to do, please talk about the trees. That is the thing that will catch them off guard, and that is the thing that will derail their movement into installing 5G if you know your trees are going to get cut down across the city. And I'm not talking about one tree. I'm talking about every single tree in your city. Because it interferes with the line of sight reception between those antennae. And they are desperate to get them into the big cities because they're going to be desperate to control you. 5G, in my personal opinion, with the effects possibly of having a carrier wave that can incapacitate you, is dangerous. If that network were hacked and they knew the right frequency, they could actually cause insanity in a city. That is dangerous, in my opinion. If you know the right carrier frequency, I can make you sick through the 5G grid to the point where you're hobbling on your knees and vomiting. That is dangerous. If prolonged exposure in terms of days, you die in that grid. They can over-amplify the signal on your electrical brain waves that make the rest of your body function. And they can, in tune, take that so far out of line that if its exposure is too long in terms of days, your body just stops functioning because it's electrically disconnected from itself. The electrical field in your body is so disrupted and so disoriented that your organs won't work correctly, nor will your blood flow, or your heart, or your brain, and your mind, your thinking. If you're in this frequency wave for too long, you become a vegetable and you die. This carrier wave, this grid going out there, I think is incredibly dangerous for those reasons given. It is my personal opinion. Based on the health effects and the possibility of hacking into the grid, it is very dangerous. And if taken over and controlled by an individual entity that knows what they're doing on a military aspect to control citizens during food riots, that is a dangerous thing, in my opinion. It is a nefarious tool, and we are terraforming our cities into taking down all the trees to be able to put this up. Dangerous. Why do you need to take down all the trees? What is so terrifying within the trees that are protecting us from these devices? It's game on, folks. I wish you the best. This is David Dubine signing off, Revolution Radio Studio A, 10 p.m. to midnight every Thursday night. This tool. I hope you research some of what I've talked about and said during this program about 5G, the EU Integrated Defense Force, the initiatives to consolidate military under one voice, one overseership, bequeathed to the EU Integrated Defense Force, how this weather is spiraling out of control, and how everybody seems to be posturing government-wise to control this unrest that everybody sees coming. I do wish you the best in your preparations because you're going to need it faster than you ever thought possible right now. It's here. Happy Friday. It's midnight. Good night. I'll see you next week. Dave Dubine signing off. Revolution Radio Studio A. 10 p.m. to midnight Thursdays, as well as my channel, Adapt 2030 on YouTube, that covers all of this in great detail in video format, so you can see the charts that I'm talking about referenced in such videos, as well as the mini Ice Age Conversations podcast. Anywhere you can find podcasts hosted across the net, 30-minute segments talking about some of these same issues. You can take it on the go while you're working out, get yourself informed, and remember, the base of us is the awareness. That's what they're trying to dissolve by all the division across our societies, that they don't want you. They want to erode the core of being aware. That is the thing. They're going to divide you any way they can, so that core of being aware does not resonate with other humans or other people you know. They don't want that resonation. That is, will take them down. I'll talk to you next week. Thanks so much for your time. These are serious issues, and I do wish you the best in your preparations. Bye-bye.
Welcome to Revolution Radio, where you, the listeners, are in charge. Here at Revolution Radio, we present 48 broadcast hours of news and information each and every day. Revolution Radio never sleeps. Revolution Radio is worldwide and borderless information. Revolution Radio is also commercial free. Revolution Radio is supported 100% by you, the listeners. And that's why we appeal to you to donate and support this station and its expenses. You can support us in many available options like archive subscriptions, our seed pack selections, or even my woodworking store. And we also even have Revolution Radio's swag at the Revolution Radio Zazzle store, which you can get t-shirts, coffee cups, even a baby onesie. Or you can just plain donate to the cause. We cannot continue without your support, and your support is what helps pay the bills. So please, if you wish us to continue, please stop by our station support page and drop a dime on us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? Family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We've got to stop them! They're going to kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it. Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
When When your doctor tells you have bad cholesterol or blockages in the arteries, what do? When diet and exercise is not enough, we try medications and hope for the best. For the last 2 decades, I have been telling people about a natural method to help solve these problems and more. Extendivite can help maintain cardiovascular health and lower blood lipid levels in adults. The 7 herbs in Extendivite are known to work together synergistically to get the results we hope for. There are many testimonials on Extendivite's effect on circulatory-related ailments. Get Extendivite today to start your journey back to a healthier life. To order, call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com or see us on amazon.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Alrighty.
We're an anarcho-syndicalist commune. We take it in turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week. Yes. But all the decisions of that officer have to be ratified at a special bi-weekly meeting. Yes, I see. By a simple majority in the case of purely internal affairs. Be quiet. But by a 2/3 majority in the case of more major... Be quiet. I order you to be quiet. Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look. Just a flesh wound.
I don't believe I've seen such a display of courage, skill, nerve, grace, stupidity.
I'll do you for that. Oh, what? Come here. What are you going to do, bleed on me? I'm invincible. You're a loony. The Black Knight always triumphs.
Welcome on, welcome all, and it is that time for Roundtable Live here at Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com. Be rolling on till 4 a.m. in the morning Eastern Time. New ideas, different hosts every night, different subjects every night. You never know what's going to happen right here at the Roundtable Live. King Arthur has nothing on us. We're going round and round.
Alrighty, welcome, good evening. This is Keith AZ live on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio network in the known universe. And that, of course, is thanks to you, the listeners. So please do click that support button, whether it's the price of a cup of coffee or $100 or... as I do a recurring donation each month, and there's different levels for that, and you can. It's still not too late to get the heritage seeds, the heirloom seeds, the grow year after year. They're not GMO, they're not even hybridized. They are the heirloom heritage seeds that grow true year after year. So many ways to support the network. Tonight, I've got a wonderful friend joining us, Robert Morningstar, who's invited another friend who I will let him introduce because this is the first time for me to meet this person. So anyway, welcome, Robert. How are you doing, sir?
Well, I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me on the show, and it's a pleasure to come aboard with my good friend, Dr. Bruce Cornett, who's also a very well-known expert in ufology, geology, palynology. Any other ologies I left out, Bruce?
No, none that I can think of right now.
Okay. Yeah, I know. We have a lot of ologies on these three heads. And today, I first want to say thank you for having us on the show on this momentous week in ufology. And I would first like to say my sad condolences to the family and friends of Stanton Friedman, who passed away. As you know, nuclear physicist, long-time ufologist going back to the 1950s, and the man who brought the Roswell story to the forefront of consciousness in America, Stanton Friedman. So I know that Bruce and I really appreciated him. We both had contact with him, and well, he's gone, but his legacy remains. He left a lot of wonderful books. We can talk about that.
And he had a lot of friends.
Say again?
And he had a lot of friends.
Oh, man.
A lot of people are remembering him.
He was a gentleman, a scholar, a scientist, and a truth teller beyond compare. So it was good to have a great man to have in our ranks, with his degree in nuclear physics and his work on nuclear reactors and atomic engines and all kinds of things like that, way back, 1950s, 60s, 70s. And he turned his life to ufology because he thought it was the most important mystery, the most important mystery in our creation at the moment. What do you think?
Well, let me just comment. Yeah, I love Stanton Friedman, tireless crusader to bring out the reality of this. And I'll never forget listening to him on Coast to Coast one evening with George Norrie, and he had on the editor of the Skeptical Inquirer.
Yeah.
Trying to think of the guy's name offhand.
Michael Shermer?
Yeah, Michael Shermer. I actually called in and I said, I met an alien and he doesn't believe in you, Michael Shermer. so anyway, but what a tireless champion. And, they asked, what is the one best story? Because they always want to boil it down to like one thing that then they can tear apart. And he said the sum totality of it. I mean, there is so much. And I absolutely agree with you, Robert. It is the biggest story ever. I mean, you could say the existence of God, but to me, that's a given. I mean, I don't even count that. It's just there is a creator. How could there not be? Because we're here. So the biggest story in the history of the entire human race is, are we alone or not? And, of course, you and I know that that's not the case. I myself have had actual direct contact. And I know you've I can't remember. You've had various types of contact too. It's not something that you can put in a box and say it's this. And
right.
It's such a vast subject. But anyway, please continue, sir.
Yeah. Well, I've had a lot of. I think 2 handfuls is a lot of experiences. Direct experiences, and some have been really 3D. Life, little creature at the foot of your bed experiences, and others are in the psychic realm, the interdimensional realm. And of course, Bruce, our friend, Dr. Bruce Cornett, has had a lifelong experience of contacts and extraterrestrial visitations and sightings. Bruce is very well known for his work here in New York at Pine Bush, and some of the discoveries that he made in that area, including magnetic anomalies that are buried 50 feet underground and seem to be beaming out a homing signal, which Bruce believes to be a beacon that points out the portal for UFOs to come into our reality in the region of Pine Bush, New York. I'm sure he can give you many more details about his own experiences there. We went up there together once many years ago, and it was a really interesting experience. It's a very spooky hollow type of place, and the best sighting location is actually a cemetery up there. So you don't know whether you're going to get an extraterrestrial or a spook, a ghost, an FBI agent or a CIA agent as well, that kind of spook. They're all over the place. So, Bruce, do you want to tell us a little bit about your contacts? I think that tonight's subject is UFOs and alien abduction, since all of us have had the experiences. I haven't been abducted, per se. I've caught them in the act. But I know you have had a lot of experience, so let me turn it over to you.
I've had some rather serious abductions. One in front of my entire drill crew in 1981 in the near Richmond, Virginia, and my drill crew at night saw me being taken and saw me being brought back to the mudlogging trailer. And I was totally out of it when I came back, and I was in a lot of pain. I was hypothermic, and when I stumbled out of the trailer, I couldn't find anybody look at the drilling rig or anywhere else. And then I saw off in the corner of the well site the entire crew clustered together, looking up at the sky. And just as I looked in that direction, a craft all lit up just took off. And I waited for the mudloggers to come back, and I said, "What were you doing?" And he said, "We were watching the UFO." And I said, "I asked you to come and get me." And they said, "We did, but you weren't there." And I said, "What do you mean I wasn't here? I was in the back sleeping in one of the bunks." And I took Rick back, and I said, "Did you look in this top bunk?" And he says, "Yes," and you were not there. And I was puzzled. I was in pain. I was confused about what had happened because I had my memory blocked. And so I just went back to the motel and slept it off, not realizing that I had the best front seat of all of them. It wasn't until 1995 that I was regressed and found out what happened aboard that ship and what they were doing. So then I forgot all about that until 1992 when I was reawakened and began getting memories of past abductions going back into my childhood and wondering what this was all about. And I was living in Middletown, New York at the time, and I saw the miniseries Intruders on television by Bud Hopkins. And I went to the bookstore, asked the manager if they had the book called Intruders, and he got the book, and then he said, "Well, you might want to read this book, Silent Invasion by Ellen Crystal." So I bought both books, and I was reading Silent Invasion, and I was shocked to find out that I lived in the near the hotspot of Pine Bush UFOs. And so I contacted Ellen, and she agreed to take me out into the field. And that first night out there with her and her group of skywatchers, we had all sorts of ships flying around us. And I was indoctrinated, literally baptized in ufology at that point. And my field work began. So, and gradually I began to figure out what was going on, and just how involved I had been in this whole field. And it has been a lifelong search to find answers since then.
You know, I've been told by people, it doesn't matter. Why do you care? What is all this? And my response again is how I started the show. It is the number one biggest story in humankind, in the entire history of humankind. Are we alone or not? Now, I was abducted. I had your classic abductions, and I still don't understand it all. And it wasn't until in my 30s that I started actually, through the help of a psychic, plumbing the depths. She was funny. She would make me work. You go to a psychic thinking they'll answer your questions, and instead they say, no, you have to go into the memory and retrieve it yourself. And so I understand a lot about it, but boy, I still have way more questions. Bruce, what do you want to tell? Where would you like to go with this? I mean, there's so many directions. It is such a vast subject. Whether it be the nature of the grays. For me, it was the little gray guys. When I saw the cover of Whitley Strieber's book, I just looked at that being, the illustration, and thought, man, those eyes, this is something's there. But at that time, when Communion came out, I had not yet recovered any memories. And
the irony of Whitley Strieber is that his experiences took place in a cabin in New York, not far from Pine Bush, and he grew up in Texas. And I have another friend who said she knew Whitley Strieber back then when he lived in Texas when he was younger. And so this is a small community, small world of connected. But
I might actually know your friend. Did she? God, what was her name? Something with a C.
Shelley Thompson. Shelley Thompson.
No, this would be a different person. I actually knew somebody that had contact with Whitley Strieber, and she just took one look at me and said, "Keith has all. There's 10 signs of alien abduction. Keith has all of them." And again, that was before I had recovered. And I said, "No, I don't. I was not. That didn't happen to me."
Right. I was totally clueless until 1992. And
I was very resistant to the idea that I'd been taken.
Yeah. Robert says you've had a very interesting experience with an alien woman. Do you want to talk about that?
Oh, sure. I'm actually very happy to tell that story because to me, this is what's the most amazing. So I'm at a New Year's Eve party with my next door neighbors, and we're just having fun. We're having a glass of wine, but not really pretty low key older people like myself and relaxed. I'm outside having a cigarette. It's twilight, and low and close. I mean, I'm talking less than a quarter mile. The closest UFO sighting I've ever had by far. And I've seen also discs that look a lot like Ed Walters on the cover of the Gulf Breeze sightings.
Yes.
But this was nothing like this. This looked like a jewel, actually. It looked like an emerald. It was glowing the most intense, incredible emerald light. The vibration was just that alone was just like the most amazing thing to see. And it was rectangular shape. I estimated it to be about 30 feet by 15 feet. I mean, that's how low and close it was. Just over this low hill, just right close, and it flew by and then went behind the hill, and I was just stunned.
What year?
Then, this would have been about 4 years ago, 2013 or so.
Oh, that's recent.
That's 6 years.
Well, yeah, that is 6 years, isn't it? Time is just flying by.
Sorry about math.
No, it might have been less. It might have been more like 2015. I don't remember exactly for sure, but at any rate, so then I started feeling tired, so I said I'm going to go home early. I didn't care if I stayed up till midnight. I mean, who cares at this point? Was
this in Arizona?
Excuse me?
Was it in Arizona that this happened?
Yeah, it was actually, like I said, right next door neighbors to where I am right now.
Oh, right where you are now. Okay.
Yeah. And so I started feeling this energy, this really pleasant, euphoric energy, and I laid down and I felt like I was undergoing psychic surgery, like my aura, and it was not subtle. It was really intense, really powerful, really good feeling, but because of having had the abduction experience, I'm not trusting. And I said, whatever you are, stop it. But it didn't continue. It continued. And I now understand the reason. I believe this being is like a harmonic of my own, like soul group or something like that. Mm-hmm. Because as time has gone on, I feel that this being is teaching me telepathy. And at one point, I was feeling very depressed. I was just feeling down. It's like, why are you contacting me? I'm nobody. I'm worthless. That kind of program. And the being in the etheric form, in other words, not physically, but I could feel her presence like super, super strongly. That's another thing about this being. This being sends me love that's like palpable. And people have gotten some ideas. I've tried to, set people straight about it. It's not a girlfriend, okay, you guys? There go your alien girlfriend, but this being does emit this incredible love that's palpable and really illuminating. I mean, it is like sort of like being in a relationship in the sense that I feel the being's love kind of energizing me, if you will. It's a really beautiful thing, but it's not like that. I don't think she's quite in this physical dimension. I think she had to lower her vibration to appear physically to me when I had the sighting of her ship that she was piloting. And I think what she was doing was sort of upgrading my etheric body, such that as time moves forward and we become in greater contact with these beings, that I'm a little bit prepared to kind of show the way for people to help with the communication and the telepathy, which we're all, I think, all getting more telepathic. in this process of becoming in greater communication with our brothers and sisters who are from other places.
Right. The reason why Robert wanted me to ask you about this contact with a female alien is because I had a very real contact, and I didn't realize who she was. I was set up and asked if I would help her, and that she would be brought to me, and she was. And I saw she was in a lot of medical problems and trouble, and I had just bought a house in Houston, Texas, so I invited her and her son to live with me, and she immediately accepted. And I spent 7 years to the day with her before she died, and I had no clue as to who she was, but she had all sorts of psychic capabilities. She had been tested by the Princeton Paranormal Lab and scored virtually 100%. She showed me all sorts of things she could do: telekinesis, telepathy, and precognition. She was very good at that, but she was only telling me just what I needed to know at that time. Had no clue that she was an actual alien in a human body. And it wasn't until she died that her spirit appeared over her grave when I said my farewell. And then a second sun appeared in an overhead cloud at 8:30 in the morning and sent down a golden beam, captured her spirit. My mother and I saw her green and blue and white spirit, starburst spirit, ascend in that golden beam up into that second sun, and then the beam contract and the light go out. She had bought me or gotten me a present of a camcorder back in 1990, and I took that with me and videotaped the area where she was buried for her family up north. And when I replayed it, I saw in the cloud, embedded in that cloud, a huge white dome-shaped mothership sticking out of that cloud. So, and then she came back to me afterwards and in spirit. And about 2 months before she died, she taught me how to recognize her thoughts in my head. She knew when she was going to die exactly and what time she was going to die. And this was all part of her plan. And after she died, she continued to communicate with me. And I can communicate with her anytime I want. But the problem, of course, became, who am I? Why? I mean, I was chosen to provide her protection for 7 years, and I did my job. And then, as one of my rewards afterwards, I was introduced to 2 of my 3 hybrid children, and that was as a holographic projection over my bed in the morning of 3 astronauts floating in space, and 2 were in NASA type decompression suits without any identification on them, and there was an alien in another decompression suit, and I was telepathically told to study the woman and the man, which I did. And when the vision was over, I woke my wife, who had been sleeping under this, and she said I woke her in the middle of a dream about me meeting my children. I said, I just think I did, but they didn't tell me their names, and she said their names in the dream were Honora and Kyle. So then my wife was beginning to think I was going crazy. That happened on Saturday morning, that's vision. And Monday she was coming home from work in New York City. She had a window seat. She saw this reflection in the window, and then the reflection didn't match anybody sitting near her. And then the woman began telepathically talking to her, and she says, "Hi, Pat. I'm Honora. I'm your husband's daughter. He's not going crazy." And she came running home all excited, hugged me, and said, "Yeah, you're not going crazy. I met Honora. Well, then I had this this desire to go to Princeton University because Bonnie, who was their biological mother, said that she had gone to Princeton, but she never went to college. So I was wondering, what is this thing to do with Princeton? I lived in Red Bank, New Jersey at the time, and Princeton was on the other side of the state. So I drove over there and went through their yearbooks, and lo and behold, I found a picture of Honora in the 1990 yearbook. But her name was not Honora, it was Tamara. She was born 33 days before Tamara and Kyle were born to Bonnie. And so I made a copy of her picture, and along with other pictures of women in her yearbook, and made a photo lineup. And when Pat came home from work, I said, would you look at these pictures and see if you can recognize anybody? When she came to the picture of Tamara, she immediately pointed to it and said, I'll never forget this face. And I said, is that the person you saw reflection in the window? And she says, yes. So she not only confirmed the existence of Honora, but also that Honora has an identical twin who was born to her surrogate mother on Earth. And so that's basically my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Oh, that's fantastic. It really feels like that's why I use the term brother and sisters. It's like our family. It's like a family reunion to me in some sense. Do you get that? I mean, it sounds like you can resonate with that.
Oh, big time. I realized when I was living with Bonnie that we were soulmates.
Right.
And after she died, and she came back in spirit and told me who we had been in past lives and past worlds and things like that. So this is an ongoing story. It's not ending anytime soon. And we keep on going on from incarnation to incarnation. And who knows why we choose to do this, other than that maybe that's the only thing to do. That's the thing to do in this universe.
Well, it goes back to that, again, that I feel like we're in a time right now of real, it's like the fabric between realities are getting thinner, and we're seeing through, the darkness, and there's a real coming together of very powerful energies. And I think, this being that's contacted me, it feels, like I said, like a harmonic of my soul. There's some very deep relationship which I'm still learning about at a very slow pace. I don't feel any pressure to try to solve it like a detective. It's more kind of unveiling, if you will, unfolding, and a natural.
Right. Question I would have is if walk-ins are possible. Could she find a suitable female body to walk into, and one of these days you're going to meet a woman and you're going to say, you are so familiar. I know I've met you somewhere before, and not realize what's going on.
Yeah, or maybe she actually is already physically incarnate, and it's just her higher self that's, I don't know. Those are wonderful questions. Or will I raise my vibration up to the point where like I said, with the reality, this is sort of what I think how it may unfold, is that we become more, as time moves forward, more on par of the same vibrational frequency of reality, and then she will become more physically. I don't know, and it's kind of a wonderful mystery to have, and not really need to know the answer to. I sort of like the idea that that these answers will come, but they'll come in their own time, if you will.
I think you're very right on that. That's one of the things I've had to learn is being happy in my situation as it is now, and not being too impatient about getting the answers, because I realize that it's all connected, and we will eventually find out what's going on.
I think so, and once we do, then the mystery will be over. So it's sort of like enjoyable to keep the game on, if you will. I don't know. That's just kind of how I feel.
I wanted to say, if I may, I wanted to say that in the psychic realm and in contact with these high alien intelligences, I was going to say higher intelligences, but they're not higher. They're just alien and different. They often show you, let me say, they've often shown me important people in my life that I would meet anywhere from the next day or the next days to the next year, 2 years, and even 10 and 15 years later. So that they show me the person or attributes like the eyes or, attributes. And the eyes, here's an interesting thing. When you have a psychic experience about something in the future that you've not yet experienced, your brain looks and rummages through your memory banks and picks out the next closest person or location or item to give you the signal. But when your brain picks out the most similar memory from your memory banks, the one thing that doesn't change and is consistent is that the eyes of the person that you're going to meet remain the same. That is to say, they say the eyes are the windows to the soul, and I think that when they project that you're going to meet another soul that looks a certain way, the one way they want to make certain that you know it's that person is they show you the real person's eyes. And that has happened to me many times. And once in 1979, I had a very, very powerful experience. And the time that I was practicing Taoism and Hinduism and Hindu dancing and Tantra and getting involved in all of those esoteric things. And I had a vision that I was sitting, embracing the most beautiful and the most fearsome woman that you could ever imagine. She had 3 faces. And when I researched the attributes of these 3 faces, I found that they were depicting a Tibetan goddess, Manjusri, and that she corresponded, strangely enough, to Kali. And my Hindu Indian teacher said to me, "Oh my God, Morningstar, you had sex with Kali. You're lucky to be alive." And but it was a very, very powerful experience. And one face was exquisitely beautiful, like a Greek goddess. Then another one was a side view of a sow. And then the other one was a really ferocious looking face that comes right out of the Tibetan tankas. You know those paintings, the famous, those giant paintings that they make of their deities. And it was a female with like the face of a boar and beautiful, curly, dark hair, but extremely fearsome. And it turned out that would be a person that I would meet many years, and I think it would be 16 years later, I met that person. And we become great, great, great friends, soul brother and sister in many ways. So you have to pay attention to your dreams. That's why I advocate, I suggest that people study Jungian psychology. Much of the madness that the world is suffering now has been imposed on it by the Freudian view of the world and the imposition of a Freudian psychology on all of us. There are millions of different, each person is a different psychology. Excuse me. But after World War II, Anna Freud, the daughter of Sigmund Freud, came here and began lobbying against all other forms of psychiatry and psychology. America had many, many schools of psychotherapy and psychiatry, and many, many of them were extremely successful. But when Anna Freud got here and started lobbying Congress and state assemblies and medical professions that Freudian psychology is the only legitimate psychology, they discredited all those others. They put the practitioners of those, American psychologies out of business, labeled them as quackery, and then institutionalized themselves by becoming the official mouthpiece for the government. For example, in court hearings, police cases, Freudian analysis of individuals is standard. And if the Freudian shrink says that person's crazy, they just take it at that person's word. And it's very unfair, because I think the shrinks are the ones that are really crazy. Anytime you try to impose one idea of humans' psychology or the nature of the human soul as the be-all and end-all, you really have gone off the wrong track. And I think psychiatry has too much power in this country, and it's got to be reined in. So pay attention to your dreams, because the dream is a vehicle both for, let's see, what would you call it? There's a word, foreseeing, but also you can, in your dream state, when you discipline yourself in the dream, and I recommend the teachings of Don Juan for understanding this, you are able to control your dream rather than being subject to it. And you're able to guide it, direct it, travel, future, present, or past, and it becomes a very, very powerful psychic instrument or weapon, because a lot of the battles that are going on, metaphysical battles, are going on in the spirit world, and you may be battling them while you're asleep. I know I've had those experiences too. What do you think?
I want to 100% agree with that. Bruce, did you have any comments?
I agree with his assessment of the psychiatry. It's a pretty mixed up field with many different viewpoints. And how can you possibly take any psychiatrist's word for what is really going on? They literally do not know. They're just guessing. And
other times projecting.
Yes, projecting. As I've come to realize that a number of psychiatrists I've talked to, I asked them, why did you get involved in this field? And it was basically because I wanted to find out more about myself. In other words, you wanted to find out what was going on in your own mind, and the answer was yes. They wanted to self-diagnose. And so that was the main reason why they became experts in analyzing others.
Right. Another one is control freaks. Seem to like to assume positions of authority, and that it's power hunger, right? That's what I believe.
Right.
You know what? Freud was notorious. Sigmund Freud was notorious for doing that, taking over the lives of individuals who came to him for treatment. He was such a conniver. He would start to do this matchmaking thing, to try to pair up some of his patients, particularly rich ones, and then, relieve them of their money in the process. He was a real scoundrel. And first and foremost, he was a totally deranged cokehead. The reason we have the cocaine problem in the United States today is because Sigmund Freud promoted it so vociferously and vigorously, claiming that it was a wonderful, wonderful drug for everything. Ultimately, he died of mouth and throat cancer, and I believe a lot of that had to do with the excess consumption of cocaine.
Well, back at when he was alive, wasn't Coca-Cola still using cocaine?
Yeah, right. Coca-Cola started off by putting cocaine in the soda, and eventually they took it out. But of course, it addicted everyone. Many of the products that are marketed in the United States are secretly designed to be addictive. For example, even soda pop. We talked about Coca-Cola, but all of the colas, they have in them now something that is called excitotoxins. And these are molecules that, when ingested, put you into a state of euphoria, and your brain kicks into a really high level of activity. But as soon as the effect wears down, the brain goes into a crash or depression and then desires reinforcement, which is, oh, I think I'll have another bottle of Coke or another bottle of Pepsi. And you wind up guzzling them. And they have pernicious effects on the body. You know that fructose that they put in a sweetener in sodas.
And aspartame as well.
Aspartame is another one, but it's far worse for you than actual sugar is.
That's right.
Again, addictive products, and they are designed also, and the addiction is also designed into the commercials that promote them. You know? So let's go back to the aliens, and
let me tie up just a couple of quick points.
Okay,
Robert.
go ahead.
So first of all, you said so many things there to comment on, and yes, this is going to tie back up. So what's happening is there are pernicious forces that are wanting to separate us from our higher spiritual reality, and I think Bruce, you can say this, and Robert, and I certainly can, that this relationship with this extraterrestrial is a very high spiritual connection. It's beautiful. It's connecting with this higher reality. And like I said, her energy is so euphoric and pleasant and just like really blissful. And there are those that would want to separate us from that higher level of reality. I mean, one of the differences is between Freud and Jung, I believe, is Jung recognized the spiritual component and the necessity for people to feel that type of connection, whereas the Freud school would have been mechanics or materialists, you know, a real mechanical type viewpoint, a real...
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
And it's really interesting what you said about eyes too, and I'll tie up dreams as well. I mean, I've had recently dreams of time travel and dreams of, I went way into the past. I occupied a younger version of myself, and I was telling the friend who I was driving in a car with, I said, this is actually me from the future. And I've also had dreams of teleportation and connecting with your dreams and your lucid dreaming, whereby you then become active. You become aware that you're dreaming. I've done this many times, and I'll realize, oh, if this is a dream, I can fly. And I'll start levitating, and I'll start really looking at things. I was levitating over Mount Tamalpais and really looking at the rocks and the trees and just enjoying the incredible experience of being able to fly. And I've had many dreams of the future, too, including meeting girlfriends before I met them in real life. And it's just astonishing. So connecting with this higher level of reality, and there is a real spiritual battle going on behind the scenes. People have no idea about. And yes, we do. Some of us do participate in that fight. Actually, do spiritual warfare in our higher, kind of astral body or whatever it is. I don't know how all that works, but sometimes you wake up kind of feeling like you've been through it a bit.
Right. I was going to say also.
Go ahead.
In regard to these meetings in the dream world, where a partner or let's call it a partner, is revealed to you, a desirable partner, but desirable to them. My experience has been that it seems to me that they wanted to tip me off that somebody was around that it would be very desirable to have sex with that person and to be on the lookout. And they would show me a very beautiful form, or it's not exactly the person, but whatever the analog, let's call it that, is very close, but the eyes are identical. And this happened to me several times during my life, where I would have such a dream. It would be very pleasant, and in the course of the next 1 or 2 days, I would meet the person in the dream and hit it off. So,
Robert,
so what can I say? It was pleasant, and it was not always long enduring. It was just like something. Hey, I think it would be really nice if you two got together for this little while, a tryst, if you want to call it that.
So,
and it would happen.
Alien Love Bite.
Yeah, the Alien Love Bite. That's what I was thinking would be a good title for tonight's show. And you know, I salute Eve Lorgan for that book, because I think all of us have suffered the alien love bite. I know I don't like aliens personally.
Well,
I don't like their intrusion in our lives. I don't like them messing up my love life back in 1978, 79, and 80.
So that messed with mine. All 4 of my wives were specifically chosen for me. And I was this specifically that this would happen. I met my first 2 wives on the same day on the same college campus, about 100 feet apart, one after the other. And the first person I met became my second wife, and the second person I met became my first wife about 14 years later. And then after Bonnie died, I was getting my mail about 8 months later, and this telepathic voice said, "Are you ready to meet the next woman in your life?" I stopped on the sidewalk. I had just gone to pick up my mail, and I thought about it, and I said, well, the last woman I was set up with was Bonnie, but this time I don't want any blind dates. So I asked if I could get to see her, and a portal opened up right in front of me, and I was looking into another dimension, into a modern all-white kitchen with a woman sitting at a round table. And she was a little bit further away than I wanted to, than I could see. So I felt my spirit being pulled out of my body and floating through that portal and floating over her. And when I got a good enough view of what she looked like, I felt my spirit being sucked back into my body, and I saw the portal close. That was on Friday after work. Go to work on Monday, walking down the hall, and a female coworker at Lamont Doherty comes out of her office, and she sees me. "Oh, Bruce, I'm so glad I caught you. Can I ask you a personal question?" And I said, "Sure, Connie, what? Are you dating anybody?" And I said, "No, why do you ask?" She said, "I had a greatest conversation with a old school friend from college, and I was wondering if I could be matchmaker." Make a long story short, I ended up meeting her. She was the woman that I saw sitting at the table. And when I told her the story, she said, "That's interesting, because on that same day, I was asked if I was ready to meet the next man in my life, but I didn't ask to see you." I said yes, and now here we are together. She was my third wife. Oh. And my fourth wife called me up on the first day I started working at NIDS in Las Vegas, and wanted to know if NIDS was doing any research on Bigfoot. She said she had all this data from El Paso on Bigfoot. And then we became friends, and she said, "I have had this vision of this man that I'm supposed to meet." And she said, "Would you please send me a picture of what you look like?" And we were communicating on email by then. And I sent her a picture, and she calls me up and said, "Oh, my God, you're the person I saw in my vision, my dream." And so she became my fourth wife.
Well, now that you mentioned Bigfoot, I'd like to say that, it's not only pretty girls that the aliens show you. And you know what? In my whole life, I've been interested in Bigfoot since the first time I heard about him was in 1959, right? And I never had a dream about Bigfoot. But about, I'd say 6 or 7 years ago, I had this very vivid dream that I woke up in my apartment. I walked out into the hallway, and I looked down the hall, and there were 2 gigantic Bigfoot. Is plural big feet? Anyway, Bigfoots were down the hall, and they were an orange fur color. And then I looked, and on the ground near me were my 2 cats, and they were the same orange-brown fur color. And I had this telepathic experience with the Bigfeet. And they were looking at me and saying, "Those cats are ours, and we're going to be coming back for them." And I said, "Yeah, you better ask them." I said, and it's all telepathic. I said, "Oh, you think so? Ask them who they belong to. And don't let me catch you coming around here after my cats, you understand?" It's a strange dream. Strange. An orange Bigfoot. So 2 days later, I am flabbergasted to get a video from British Columbia of a boat tour along a lake up there. And while they were going along the lake, the people had cameras, video cameras, and somebody caught an orange Bigfoot foraging along the shore, picking berries or something out of a tree. And it was so stunning that the boat driver whipped the boat around and came back for a second look. And they were able to get this orange Bigfoot going into the woods. Now, how far-fetched is that? First of all, I had never even conceived of any Bigfoot other than a black or dark brown color. And this thing is bright orange and the same color as my cats. And I say, that's a ludicrous dream. There's no such thing as an orange colored Bigfoot. And then the video comes out.
Wow.
So,
now there is the break music.
There's the break music.
Yeah, so we've got another hour to go, and we've got two wonderful guests with us tonight, Robert D. Morningstar and Bruce Cornett, Dr. Bruce Cornett. We'll be right back, everybody.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Everyone, it's Barbara Jean Lindsay, the Cosmic Oracle. If you have questions about your past lives or future plans, need answers from the cosmos about your love life or career, or just want to keep your finger on the pulse of the planet, check out my show, The Cosmic Oracle, here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
It is no secret that the so-called mainstream media is best described as controlled propaganda. Countless news stories are either totally ignored or spun with half-truths, and because of this, essential facts and vital information are often compromised. Join Dr. Ott every Friday night on Studio B at 10 p.m. Eastern and learn why The Story Behind the Story was nominated for a Peabody Award in its second year of producing unparalleled broadcasting excellence in 1997. That is, if you really care about learning the truth.
Wadiya will remain a dictatorship. Or be quiet. Why are you guys so anti-dictators? Imagine if America was a dictatorship. You could let 1% of the people have all the nation's wealth. You could help your rich friends get richer by cutting their taxes and bailing them out when they gamble and lose. You could ignore the needs of the poor for healthcare and education. Your media would appear free, but would secretly be controlled by one person and his family. You could wiretap phones. You could torture foreign prisoners. You could have rigged elections. You could lie about why you go to war. You could fill your prisons with one particular racial group, and no one would complain. You could use the media to scare the people into supporting policies that are against their interests.
Tune in Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time for Liberation Nation with Deacon John, where America comes to hear the truth.
I know this is hard for you Americans to imagine, but please try.
Ohio Exopolitics will be on from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern on Studio A. Mark Schneider will have guests on that will discuss many important topics, including the state of the world today. However, much of the show will be dedicated to the writings of Edward Albert Meyer. Let me read a short passage from one of his writings. Love is the highest principle of creation, and through it, everything exists in absolute logic. All of nature in its indescribable splendor is nothing but the love of creation, which is expressed visibly. The love of creation is everywhere, because without it, nothing at all would be able to exist. Please join Mark on Ohio Exopolitics from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern on Studio A.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
When your doctor tells you you have bad cholesterol or blockages in the arteries, what do? When diet and exercise is not enough, we try medications and hope for the best. For the last 2 decades, I have been telling people about a natural method to help solve these problems and more. Extendivite can help maintain cardiovascular health and lower blood lipid levels in adults. The 7 herbs in Extendivite are known to work together synergistically to get the results we hope for. There are many testimonials on Extendivite's effect on circulatory-related ailments. Get Extendivite today to start your journey back to a healthier life. To order, call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com or see us on amazon.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
All righty. Kind of a sudden end to the bumpers there. Anyway, we're back. This is Keith AZ Live. We've got 2 just fantastic people with us. Robert D. Morningstar, who has a show on this network. Robert, I'll let you tell everybody where to find you in a second. And also Dr. Bruce Cornett. And let's probe. Let's get a little deeper into this. But first, Robert, why don't you tell everybody about your website and your show?
Okay. Well, I'm the editor of UFO Digest, and that's how. Let me see. I met Bruce Cornett long before I became editor of UFO Digest, but that is one of the many fields of science that brings us together. The other one is geology and the history of the Earth and history of the world and life on Earth. So UFO Digest. I also have on WordPress a mirror site that's called the UFO Spotlight. And it's usually the UFO Spotlight on Goofy Numbers. There's a new article that I've just edited by my friend Patrick O'Carroll. And it's a real rip on Freemason numerology and Freemason numbers and Freemoronic numerology. Let's call it that. There's some people that believe the Earth is flat. They believe that the sun is stationary and only 30,000 miles away and 51 miles in diameter. And there's a lot of kooky stuff. So he wrote, my friend Patrick, to whom the world owes a great debt. Patrick O'Carroll and I released 4 years ago the details of the Kalergi Plan, which is the plan to overwhelm Western Europe and change its ethnic identity through mass migration, a plan that was put in action in 1920 by a man named Richard Kuhendorf Kalergi. So he wrote Goofy Numbers, and it's a very fun satire. And on Sundays at 3 to 5 p.m., I have the Morning Star Report here on Revolution Radio with my co-host, Scott Teeters, where we do a summation up to the nation of the news of the week. And then we have a special guest like Dr. Bruce Cornett, and Roy Schaefer, expert on JFK assassination, and many others. So tune in on Sundays between 3 and 5 for the Morning Star Report. Thank you.
You always do a fantastic job. Dr. Bruce Cornett, I do not know much about you. Can you give me a little short, maybe bio, or do you have a website, or are you doing radio shows? Tell us a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind.
I have quite a few websites on 4 different servers in 2 different countries. I have one on Monmouth Internet, and one's on my ex-wife's server called Sunstar Solution. I have 13 years of college, bachelor's and master's at the University of Connecticut, and a PhD at Penn State. And then I did additional college work in computer programming and also photography and video recording. So I have quite a long background in education, and I've worked in the oil industry for about 11 years down in Houston, Texas. And then when we moved up to New York, where I worked with a close colleague, Dr. Paul Olson at Columbia University, for about 4 or 5 years, I became involved in his deep core drilling project, in which we drilled 7 wells in New Jersey into the Newark Basin, recovering 4,000 feet of core from each of the 7 wells. So I was the person who had to describe all 28,000 feet of core over a 3-year period. And that was a very rigorous period of time because, I had to drive to the well site about 2 hours away. So it was a 2-hour commute back and forth from home. And during that period of time, my wife died. So I had all of this pressure on it, but the job was done. We completed it. And then I met my third wife, and she wanted to be, she was a workaholic. She was a computer programmer, graduated from Berkeley and from Brown University. And she was the one I was set up to meet. And she said, I need somebody who will help raise my children. And she was paying a babysitter $1,000 a week or a month rather, to help raise their children. And so I said, well, let me raise your children for you, and you can continue working. And then she gave me basically carte blanche stipend to go out and do my field work in Pine Bush. So that turned out to be a very positive relationship on that score. And then I got a job at NIDS out at National Institute of Discovery Science in 2004. Went out there, worked for 4 months there before Robert Bigelow decided to shut that institute down. And I was set up to meet my fourth wife, who said, well, why don't you come live with me in El Paso, Texas? So you could say that my first 2 wives, I chose the place to live, and my second 2 wives chose the place I was going to live with them. So that's a little bit of an abstract about my life. And now I'm retired and living in El Paso and writing books.
Now, let's get into some of your conclusions. And you've got such a broad area to look at. All of us have had encounters with extraterrestrials. I have far more questions than I have answers about. But as far as the abduction experience, have you come to any conclusions that you want to talk about?
Actually, more questions than conclusions.
Just like me.
Because after my children were identified, I have not been allowed to get to know them personally. I mean, it was sort of like, well, they were not raised by you, therefore you can't call them your children, even though they are my biological children. And that was a problem because I don't have any children of my own due to a childhood accident. And as a consequence, I want to know why I was essentially, abandoned after about 5 or 6 years back in the mid-90s. And my problems with my own personal life, it kept on getting worse.
Abandoned by Bruce? Abandoned by whom? The aliens?
Yeah.
The guiding lights?
Yeah. After I went out, took a job at NIDS in Las Vegas, I haven't seen a UFO sighting until just about a week ago. My first UFO sighting here in El Paso, and that was quite a spectacular sighting. I almost got a picture of it happening. I got my cell phone camera out, and I took a picture right after the craft disappeared. But this was one over the Fort Bliss, and the Biggs Airfield here in El Paso, which is a huge military complex. And I first saw this jet taking off and climbing at a very rapid rate from Biggs Field. And then it started to bank, and it banked extremely hard. I mean, it did a 180-degree turn as it was climbing up towards a low cloud bank. And then I saw this disc-shaped object off to its right, and it was headed straight for that object. And the object started to back up as the jet, turned and headed directly for it. And I was trying to get a good picture of it, and all of a sudden, poof, they both just vanished, just instantly disappeared. And wait a minute, what the hell? And I told my friend who was driving the car that, did you see that UFO? So he knows I was looking at, and I have a picture of where it all happened. But unfortunately, I pushed the shutter button about a second too late.
So the airplane's not in the picture either?
No, it vanished. It was heading straight towards the UFO, and I mean it was less than a quarter mile from it, and the UFO started backing up as it was heading towards it on an intercept course, and they just both disappeared.
Yeah, it sounds like the jet had a stealth technology, because it doesn't sound like it was close enough to be sucked into dimensional portal opening, if that's what the UFO did. I think they can shift frequencies kind of in and out, depending on them. I always have to remind people, just because they're extraterrestrial doesn't mean they're nice. Just because they're dead doesn't mean they're smart, in referring to the subject of extraterrestrials and also other types of beings, non-physical type of entities, because there's a myriad of them, in my experience. It sounds like they both transited out of this dimension. Is that what? Yeah.
That's the impression I got.
Yeah.
I have a question for both of you. You brought up the subject of eyes and how eyes identify the soul of an individual, correct?
Windows to the soul.
Windows to the soul. Well, on Ancient Aliens the other day on the History Channel, they had an interesting topic. They were studying RH negative factor, how unique it was, and that it was, it just came out of nowhere. And then they said the highest percentage of people with hazel green eyes are abductees. What colors are your eyes?
Mine are hazel green.
Mine are brown.
Well, my driver's license said my eyes are brown, and for a good part of my life, like 2/3 of my life, my eyes have been brown. And then when I met Bonnie in 1984, my eyes started to change to green, and now they are hazel green.
Wow.
But brown is also considered hazel. Sometimes, there's brown hazel and there's green hazel eyes. So it's a fascinating statistic. I noticed that too. Over the course of decades of encountering people who had been abducted, I noticed a majority of them are hazel-eyed people. Also, people who see UFOs regularly, hazel-eyed people. And I've learned
more green. I mean, they are sort of still a little bit hazel on the outer perimeter, and they are getting almost emerald green in the center.
Right.
Wow. Well, the topic of the eyes is incredibly interesting. So one of the dreams where I met a future girlfriend, I was in the dream, her eyes, it just became mesmerizing. Our eyes just like lock, and it was in the same, like the situation. I was then 3 nights later playing a gig with my band. I'm a guitar player. And the exact same scenario unfolded, where a good friend of mine came up with a girl, and our eyes, the same type of interaction happened. And then my friend calls me a few days later and says, "Hey, Suzanne wants to meet you," and just like in the dream, we fall in love. And then another thing, so there's an illustration of Billy Meyer's alleged contact with extraterrestrial Pleiadian named Semjaze.
Yes,
Semjaze. Okay. So I was going through, I had a website for a while there. I've let it expire, but I may regenerate it. I just wasn't doing that much with it. But I was looking for photographs to have on it, and I see this illustration of Semjaze, and I'm looking at the eyes. I'm going, God, I know this person. And that's when this whole information started opening up with the connection with this being that flew by. She had already flown by. She'd already done the psychic work on me that night. And it made me feel really tired, but really euphoric. And then, and this is like a year or two later. It's much later. I had not even thought about it. And all of a sudden, I see those eyes, and it just opens up this flood, and I go, I know you. And that's when I started really opening up the telepathic contact.
Interesting.
Now, when you said, I know you, that was to a real person that you met who had those eyes later? Is that what you're saying?
No.
In the spirit world, you saw them again?
Not to this point. It's just a illustration. It's not a photograph. It's just an artist rendition of what this Semjaze is supposed to look like. And I'm looking at that, going, I know you, and then that, and so I may yet meet her in person, but because we've mind melded, it's like beyond intimacy already. If you follow me.
Yeah. One thing that I thought was very strange when I read Billy Meyer's book, I should say Wendell Stevens' book about Billy Meyer experiences.
Right.
Extraterrestrials from the Pleiades. The name Semjaze, extremely unusual, but it is a name that's familiar to me. That Semjaze is the name of one of the two leaders of the fallen angels in the Book of Enoch.
Right.
In the Book of Enoch, it's what is the first one? Azazel. Azazel is the evil, the really evil one who gets them all together, and Semjaze is his partner, and they're the ones that take the oath to have sex with terrestrial women and produce the hybrids who turn out to be the Nephilim, the giants, and the Rephaim. And the Rephaim seem to be giants and reptilians at the same time. Now, the thing about the soul, right? The eyes, the windows to the soul. And Bruce said something very interesting, that some aliens can be walk-ins. They can come into a person's body and kind of nest, cohabitate, to do some of their, let's call them tricks. And sometimes they can just bump the person out for a while, and then the person has to come back and reclaim their body. Do you know much about that, Bruce or Keith?
Well,
let me make a quick. I just want to make a real quick comment and then proceed. I am not endorsing Billy Myers. He seems to think he's the only contactee ever. And so I don't want, and I don't believe this being that's contacted me is Pleiadian. In fact, she says that she's Lyran, and she says she is of the first race. So it's not the same being. And I was reminded, people have accused me, oh, you're in league with the total not. No, it's not like that. Okay. I just want to make that clear.
I agree with you. That's one of I take exception to anyone who says that they're the only ones, Richard Boylan. Come on. Dr. Richard Boylan, years ago, comes out and says that he's the galactic ambassador from, whatever, Ashtar Command. I think that people really have to put set limits on their imagination. And I'm always suspect. Anybody who claims that they're the only one to do anything,
Right.
And tries to debunk everybody else's experience. I don't find that kind of witness reliable, because it shows me that they're out for power and for influence. They're not out to educate the public as to what they're really dealing with. So I take exception to Billy Meyer on that score, but I do believe his experience.
Yeah, and so I just wanted to make that clear. Also, I want to make it clear, I think my experience, talking to you, Robert, and you, Bruce, Dr. Bruce Cornett, and the other information, I've been, obviously have intense interest in this because it's touched my life directly. I'm far from unique. There's all kinds of people that are having these type of contact experiences right now. Most of them are not going to talk about it, though, because they're concerned with their job or their family, not taking them seriously if they express what is actually happening. But this is happening all over the world to all kinds of people. In fact, James Gillian at ESETI Ranch, you can have an encounter like on any given weekend. This is going on all over the world, and I believe it's preparing us to have a greater contact with, again, our genetic related extraterrestrials, because they've seeded us over and over again on planet Earth, as best as I can figure out so far. Anyway, go ahead.
The spirit of my late wife came back to me in 1994. She revealed her spiritual name to me, her ET name, and it was Kahra, capital K, small a, capital R, small a. And it didn't take me long to figure out that Kahra is symbolized by the sun disk above upheld arms to the ancient Egyptians, and the upheld arms became the bull's horns, and then became the crescent moon, and the sun disk became the five-pointed star, and that so the symbol of Islam was actually taken from the name or the goddess Kahra, and who both Isis and Nephthys were worshipped back in ancient Egypt. And so what was going on here? This was the biggest mystery of them all, that the spirit of my late wife claimed to be Kahra, who was also Nimhursag, she told me, and who was the mother of Enlil and Enki. So what am I doing in dealing with some reptilian Pleiadians that are here still on Earth, manipulating humankind and creating our religions? I don't know. All I can say is that the more I've learned, the more ignorant I seem to find myself. The less I know. And right now, I don't know what to actually trust anymore, other than that, I've been told many things about what my relationship with Kahra has been in the past, and it goes back to the Pleiades. And interestingly enough, Lyra is also involved in this. And I'll bring up one story. Robert, you've heard this about what happened to me in Amsterdam in 1963. When I was with my French class, we were coming back from the Mediterranean, from Cannes, after spending the summer there. And we stopped off for 3 days in Amsterdam to do sightseeing. And my first morning coming down, a bunch of us guys were meeting in the lobby of the American Hotel, and there was this short, pretty woman standing off on the side. And when I made eye contact with her, she came over and introduced herself, and she asked me what we were doing. And I told her, and she said, "Well, would you like to have me give you the tour of Amsterdam? And for 3 days we met, and we toured Amsterdam together. Her name was Maya, and on the third day, when she said, "We're going to go back to the zoo because I want you to meet my close friend Lyra," and I met Lyra, and then at the end of the third day, she said, "I want you to take me back to my room," and I did, and said, "Can we correspond?" I was looking, to get her address so that I could write to her, and she said, "Well, that's not possible." And I said, "Why isn't it possible?" She knew Amsterdam like the back of her hand, and I thought it was local. And she says, because I don't live here. I said, where do you live? She says, I live in the mountains. And I said, what mountains? The Andes Mountains. And what? And you lived in South America? This was just blew my mind. Well, I put it in the back of my mind. There wasn't anything I could do about it. And then in 1994-95, I met Dr. Carla Turner at one of the, I think the Ozark conventions, UFO conventions. And she was there with Ted Rice. And they had just published their book called Masquerade of Angels. It was the story that where he was, Ted Rice was hypnotized, and his experience with Maya and Lyra in 1962 was described in great detail. And when I read that, I was shocked because everything that Maya asked, all the questions that Maya was asking Ted Rice, the Maya I met in Amsterdam was asking me. Although he had spent weeks there with her, and on the final day, when his time was up working summers from high school, they took him up into the mountains and introduced him to their saucer, their spaceship. They're hiding in a box canyon, and they flew him into their underground base in the Andes Mountains. And there they showed him how they cloned humans and could transfer consciousness from one to the next, so they could have, in essence, eternal life. Just, when one body wears out, you replace it with a brand new body. And he was incredulous. He didn't want to believe it. So they said, well, let us transfer you into one of these clones' bodies. And the next thing he knew, he was waking up in a female body. And that really freaked him out, as you can imagine. And he said, no, I want to go back to my original body. So they put him back in his original body, and they flew him home, and they gave him screen memories and brainwashed him so he had to be hypnotized to be able to extract that information. But when you put that information together with my information, I mean, it's astounding. I mean, yes. Maya means, mystery. It's and Lyra, of course. Why is the word Lyra and the constellation Lyra come into this picture? I don't know.
Well, Bruce, I want to say this regarding the names. Remarkable names, Ka, Ra. If you're talking in terms of Egyptian, Ka and Ra together mean the soul of Ra. The right. Ka was essentially a person's double. It was the life force, and at death it was separated from the body. And that's one of the reasons for the extensive and elaborate preparation of the body for the afterlife, was to ensure that the Ka had a home. So you have Ka, Ra, soul of Ra, or double of Ra. And then with regard to Maya, I think it's extremely relevant that Maya is one of the Pleiades. She is one of the daughters. The Pleiades are named after the daughters of Atlas. So the daughters are Maya, Alcyone, Asterope, Selino, Taygeta, Electra, and Merope. And Maya is foremost among them. I suppose that would be the eldest daughter. And Atlas was commanded by the god Zeus to hold up the earth, and Pleione was the mythical protectress of sailors, and that was their mother. So the Pleiades are the daughters of Atlas and Pleione. And this coincidence of names is also a sign to me that they give you signposts, Sometimes it's names, sometimes it's locations. And you made the connection between Lyra and Maya in your Holland experience of 1962 and this later experience that you've just related to us.
Exactly. My experience with Maya and Lyra was in 1963, and Ted Rice's experience was in 1962, and that's awfully close. I mean, come on now. And the other
it's also interesting that Holland is a hotbed UFO activity. I'm in touch with a Dutch psychic named Robert van der Broek, who has had regular contact with ETs since he was a boy. As a matter of fact, he had his first experience when he was 7 years old. He saw a UFO while playing outside, and it instantly changed him into a very psychic individual, a psychic child. And when he was about 12, the authorities thought that he was mentally ill or emotionally disturbed. So they institutionalized him for a year. But in the course of a year, he convinced his nurse, the lady who was overseeing him. She went up to him. She said, you're not emotionally disturbed. You're not, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just a very gifted psychic. So she became a spokesperson for him. And he was released when she proved to the authorities that the boy was not disturbed or insane, and that he actually just did have a very powerful psychic gift. Now, one of the things he does is he takes spirit photos. He has a knack for feeling the presence of a spirit. He does spirit photography, and he starts shooting where he feels the spirit. And over the course of the last few months, he's convinced me. I had a live, on-the-air experience where he had already taken 3 sets of photographs of spirits that were manifesting. And I was called in from London to participate because one of the spirits seemed to show up after my name was mentioned. And the spirit that showed up, and he took pictures, 11 pictures of him, was John F. Kennedy. So Johnny Webb called me up, and I participated. We were on for 5 hours. And he kept taking photos, and he got aliens, and he got, the first one was, without a doubt, John F. Kennedy. But the last one, which was when Johnny became a little pushy, I thought, psychic work tires you, it drains you of energy, it's very, very demanding. And so Robert with 2 B's, Robert van der Broek, said, Johnny, I'm really tired. I don't know if I can do this. And Johnny was very persistent, and then Johnny said a prayer, and he asked for divine intervention, that if it was possible to have a sign, please, God, give us a sign. It was a very sincere prayer he uttered. So Robert was very reluctant. He said, okay, I'll do it. So he took his camera, and rather than going off to the corner of the room where he had been shooting the other pictures, he just sat there at his desk, and he started shooting the monitor. On the monitor, depicted on the monitor, since we were on Skype and on camera, left side was him, the right side was me. I am seen in the photo, sitting at my desk here in my living room, doing a Skype chat with them. And on the left side is Robert taking the pictures, shooting the screen. So he knocks off about, 10, 12 pictures. And then while we're watching them, he goes, no, I didn't get anything. No, I don't think so. He's going really fast. So something said to me, he's going through them too fast. And I said, hey, Robert, do me a favor. Turn your camera so we can see the screen. Put it up to your computer camera so we can see the pictures, and then go through them slowly. Now, present in this, let's call it a seance, okay? Because I get the feeling that was more or less what it turned out to be. One was Janet Stanley, who is the wife of Gordon James Gianninotto, who has a program on this station on Fridays at 12 midnight. So she is a multiple time abductee and mother to ETs. And so Johnny asked, with her permission, if we could have a visitation perhaps from one of her ET human offspring. So he starts shooting, as I said. So I said, Johnny, let's just see the pictures. He was tired. He was bored. He'd had it, and he's just shooting. And I said, Johnny, Robert, turn the camera toward the lens of your computer so we can see the pictures. So he starts going through them more slowly, and they're all the same. Then all of a sudden I saw a little pink spot, and he went by it. And I said, I saw something. And Janet yells, hi, I saw an alien. Go back, go back. And he reluctantly goes back, and he shot back too many times. And I said, hey, Robert, move up. 2 more pictures. Move 2 forward. Puts it 2 forward. He put it up to the screen. She screamed. It's there. It was there. And it was the clearest picture of a white, gray alien with black eyes and so sweet looking. It was just, it was a shocking moment, but at the same time, I had a feeling of elation. And the reason I had a feeling of elation is that it reminded me of somebody. And what it reminded me of was my cat, who had passed away about 3 years ago. And the circumstances of the photo are that the alien, let's call it that, the alien in the photo appears to be sitting in the same chair that I'm sitting in. As I'm leaning forward, it's sitting on my right side and behind me and sticking his head right into the lens. And when my friend saw it, she said to me, Robert, that looks like Lancelot. And I said, you're right. Now, Lancelot was my dear cat, one of 2. I have Lancelot and Galahad. But Lancelot passed away about 3 years ago. But the fact is, he used to hang around with me 24/7. I'd get up, we'd have coffee, we'd walk through the house, and he'd be following me all the time. And when I was working at this desk, at the seat I'm sitting in, I would lean forward, he'd jump up on the back of the seat, and if I leaned forward enough, he'd drop into the back of the seat and pop his head out to see what I was doing. And the photograph was exactly like that. It's a very beautiful photograph. And I cherish it. I haven't released it. I don't want to sensationalize it, but I am telling you about it now. And with you 2 friends, I will share it with you privately. I may publish it in UFO Digest, so keep an eye out for it when the time is right. So Holland is a hotbed. And besides Robert, I know another person in Holland who is a woman who has seen UFOs and has had a lot of contact. So they're very interested in certain gene pools, right? They're interested in people with green hazel eyes. They're interested in a certain group of a Dutch gene pool. They're also interested in former U.S. Marines. I know a handful of Marines who have had regular visitations and intrusions. Visitation sounds nice. Intrusions. And they have repeatedly intruded into their lives and done really weird things. And one of them, I don't know if you know John Edmonds. Do you know John Edmonds, Bruce? Anybody know John?
I think so.
Yeah, John Edmonds is an ex-Marine, and they kept bothering him, so he started sleeping with a samurai sword by his bed. And one night, they came in, he grabbed the sword, and he just whacked one. And he just sliced it in 2. The thing evaporated, but he found that there was a residue on the sword, on the samurai sword. So he took the sample, and he and an Air Force captain, former Air Force captain, retired, named Robert Collins, who wrote Exempt from Disclosure, got the sample and sent it to one of the top biologists in the country to have it analyzed, and without telling him who or what it was. And the analyst said that he'd never seen anything like it before because the cells that he found under the microscope had characteristics of plant and animal simultaneously. So there's some weird stuff going on and weird chemistry that these ETs are conducting.
So green aliens is not out of the picture, is it?
Right, nor is the story of the Thing. Remember? The original Thing in the Arctic?
Right, I've always wondered why...
James Arness. Remember the movie with James Arness? The premise was that thing was animal and human. Remember, the plants, it grew from a plant, but it fed on blood. So I think all of these, the movies have been trying to reveal to us a lot of these aspects and attributes of aliens and alien contact. I think those are significant synchronicities. Lyra and Maya, for example.
No, it's fascinating. Your point about movies, because in a fictional format, then they can present actual, real truth. And some of these truths, it's astonishing when they come out in that form. Bruce, did you want to comment?
I agree that a lot of script writers are being influenced directly. I mean, even, we know that Star Trek and with Roddenberry was heavily influenced. So was Star Wars. One of the things that Lucas said that he had these ideas, these dreams, and out of which the Star Wars episodes came. One of the things that I've wondered about is whether or not Star Wars is actually about a real war that has occurred in the very distant past, and involving the Pleiades. And where I got that insight is in the the contest between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, being father and son, but also in Princess Leia. Why the name Princess Leia? Have you ever thought about that?
No.
Well, if you abbreviate princess to a P in front of Leia, what do you have?
Pleiades. Pleiades, yes.
Yeah.
Very insightful. Very insightful. Well, listen, about George Lucas, the story I heard is that George Lucas, way back in the early 70s, he was driving through the desert and he had a close encounter with UFOs. And that after that encounter, it wasn't a dream, it was a real CE1 or 2. And that is what got him working on the Star Wars. Do you know that he made another science fiction movie before that, which was
THX 1138?
No, but a student film. I think it was Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Oh, yeah.
Which turns out later on to be basically the story in Alien, except it's a farce, and it's a giant killer alien tomato that's doing the people. But it shows you how ideas go through metamorphosis and get more and more refined. Also, we should take note that Spielberg screened E.T. for President Reagan in the White House. You know that?
Right.
And Reagan was completely enthralled. And Reagan actually started an initiative to reveal UFOs during his presidency, but the deep state fought him back. But he got the aviary. You know the aviary? The UFO specialists in the government, in the Air Force, in the CIA, in the NSA, who got together. It included Bruce Maccabee amongst them.
Right.
To start leaking and start speaking about it and writing, but under the pseudonyms of names of birds, like hawk and seagull and falcon and so on, condor. They took bird names, so that's why they're called the aviary. But that was started off with President Reagan telling a CIA guy, who's the CIA guy? I believe it was Richard Helms. Richard Helms was still with the CIA, and that he told him to get this thing started. That they wanted to let the people know in general that UFOs are real and that there is an alien presence, but they didn't want to say so much that it would cause the panic. So it's part of an acclimatization process that's been going on for more than 50 years now. I found out about it in 1965. And I was told then that there were 7 7-year programs that the CIA had set up for the psychological preparation of the American psyche to receive the news about UFOs.
I believe that's part of my purpose, and you both might feel that as well. I think
Sure.
We are going to have much greater understanding as time moves forward, to the point where we'll have open contact and actual commerce and information sharing, and kind of a reunion, if you will, with these old genetically related groups, the Pleiades and the Lyrians. And I do believe that there has been this cosmic war going on. One of the stories, which I find to be the most credible, and again, I don't have any beliefs anymore. I know things, but I don't believe anything. I have to find out for myself. I have to get the information, but I believe we will. And one of the stories is that the Lyra was attacked by these reptilians, and then there was a diaspora, and that seeded Earth and the Pleiades and many other, because the Lyrians didn't know war. They didn't have any defenses, and so they were basically wiped out. And those that were able to flee then seeded many other planets, and that war is actually still going on between some of these groups.
And that's what I've heard.
I believe the war is going down right now on Earth between two alien super forces that are using humans like I use chess pieces.
Yeah, proxies.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Very good. I mean, I agree with you 100%. What I've heard from Susan Johnson, who claims to be an alien, she not only has an alien name, but she also speaks alien. And she remembers all of her past lives and different planets and things like this. And she says, yes, there are two groups very much at war with each other. And you're correct. Humans are the the biological units they're using on Earth to fight this war.
Yes. Over the last few years, I've really delved very deeply into the creation stories of all the major religions, including the Sumerian texts and the telling of the Anunnaki creation story. Right. And it's very shocking to realize that when you study the process that the Anunnaki used to create Adamu, the first man,
right,
it's a very for people who are not used to medical things, the description is, in the modern parlance, very yucky. They took clay, and the Anunnaki, a.k.a. the gods, a.k.a. the Elohim, let us create man in our own image, right? Remember that's what they said? So that was their image. But man was a more material being. And according to the story of the creation of the immortal one, because the first one didn't live long, the first one didn't live long and couldn't procreate. The second one lived 600 years and could procreate, but was so incorrigible and uncontrollable that Yahweh, or the deity, had to destroy them all with the flood. And the third attempt was Adamu, the red man, or the man of red dirt. So they took red clay and they mixed it with all their vital essences, the gods with their semen. They took an egg from
Ninhursag.
Ninhursag. I was going to say Ninhursag, or the equivalent of Isis.
Right.
And they all spit on it, and they put a lot of genetic material into this bundle of gunk, and they artificially implanted it in Ninhursag. And she gave birth to Adamu. But before they implanted it, it states explicitly that they killed an Igigi. And Igigi was one of these lesser gods, and he's kind of like a gray alien. These are the slaves that the Anunnaki brought to Earth to mine the gold, who ultimately rebelled after 50,000 years. So we had enough. We were we were signed on to go into outer space, not to work in mines, and so they caused a strike, which necessitated the creation of a slave race to mine the gold for the Anunnaki. But the key point is, it states that they killed an Igigi, they took his soul, and they stuffed his soul into the bundle, into the mix, so that all humans would have an immortal soul. So maybe this is what they're coming back to farm. We're just shells. human beings are just shells for the spirit being, which is perhaps what they're here to cultivate or to harvest.
Well, Kara told me that souls are brought from different worlds here to incarnate as humans in a very planned and organized fashion. They come with other individuals from their planet as spirit guides. So they come here to learn certain lessons and to lead certain types of lives. And that was what the main purpose of Earth was or has become, is a school for increasing the knowledge and education of all these spiritual eternal beings.
I have another theory, and which is that there is a spiritual war in interdimensional space, and that God created man to be his principal instrument because it is unique to be a human being. We have spiritual insight, we have a spiritual soul, and yet we have a body that can go to the bottom of the sea, can traverse the earth, can fly through the air and go into outer space. And there's, to my knowledge, no other terrestrial creature that's given that power.
Yeah,
I believe we are God's secret weapon in this cosmic battle between the forces of good and evil.
Interesting.
Because we can work in matter. We can actually create stars. We can keep the universe going. We can put an end to entropy. Mm-hmm. Imagine that.
Yep.
You know, this idea came to a friend of mine probably, 40 years ago. I was walking with my friend. His name was Mr. Henry Galliano. And he said, Robert, I figured this out. Why was man created? I said, well, what do you think? He says, do you know that the universe is going to get cold and it's going to die? I said, yeah, I've heard of that theory of entropy. He said, well, do you realize that we human beings now have the capacity? We have the knowledge, not yet the capacity, but we have the knowledge to create stars. So maybe that's why we were born. Maybe that's why God created us, so that we can keep the universe going. When it starts to get cold, we can make stars form and keep it going.
Maybe this has already happened before.
Yeah, I thought it was a remarkable insight, a beautiful theory. It certainly gives a noble purpose to man's place in the universe. Hey, we're the janitor, we're the handyman. We have to keep the furnace going. We have to keep the heat so all of life can thrive.
So what is the reason for 7 billion humans on Earth? I mean, what are they harvesting?
I think soul energy. Of course, I know this is a shock to a lot of people, but a lot of people who've had contact with UFOs and touched UFOs, alien flying saucers, said that they felt that the thing itself was alive. Mm-hmm. And some people believe that they are driven by soul energy, and perhaps that we are, they talk about us as containers in the Yellow Book. After you read a few chapters of the Yellow Book, they're talking about the containers this, the containers that. You get to chapter 3, you realize, oh my God, they're talking about human beings. We're the containers. The containers of what? Fuel cells for UFOs?
And The Matrix, the movie, comes in.
The genetic material for the next generation of evolving humanity.
Well, they're definitely hybridizing. Genetic samples were taken from me as well. I have children as well, and I, through a psychic, aided me in connecting with their energies, and it was actually a really beautiful thing. And there's actually several hundred of them apparently that they have reproduced from my genetics and theirs, and not all of them are very happy. Some of them are not in very good circumstances. So the idea of this being a school, I'm 100% down with. We're learning soul lessons. I think our souls are actually get bigger. Like a plant grows, I think our souls grow as we choose to exercise responsibility and understanding that these challenges we face are actually opportunities for spiritual growth. And then there's this war that's going on, and then there's races that I believe are farmers. You know, they're in other words, they go through and try to seed life wherever it can form, and that matter itself is conscious. So anywhere the conditions are right, I don't know. Those are just some thoughts that come to mind. We are running out of show, and I want to be sure, Bruce, any final thoughts, anything you want to add? We've got about 3 minutes.
Well, I think we're all going to learn a lot in the near future with all of the disclosure that is starting to take place. More and more people are now feeling able to come forward, and for example, on Facebook, I've never seen so many people talking about their experiences.
Wow!
So it is amazing that it once the environment is okay for people to talk about the subject, we're going to learn a lot that just how common abductions really are.
And there is the music. I 100% agree. I believe we are going to get the answers in our lifetime, maybe really soon. Who knows? But within at least 5-10 years, I think, is my impression with the speed at which things. Anyway, thank you so much, both of you.
Right. Just remember this: when the baby is born, if you don't like it, you can't put it back. Right?
Listen to Revolution Radio at Freedom Slips.
Don't make any babies you don't want.
Right back.
But anyway, my last thought is this. I'd like to thank the United States Navy for bringing disclosure forward and making it a reality in 2017. I worked in 2008 and 2010 with Clay Pickering and Sean Pickering and representative of the U.S. Navy and the Pentagon who were trying to make disclosure happen then through the United Nations. It failed because of a backlash from the deep state and some people in ufology who want to keep the mystery going for profit. So thank you, U.S. Navy, for making disclosure a reality.
Worldwide and borderless information. Revolution Radio is also commercial free. Revolution Radio is supported 100% by you, the listeners. And that's why we appeal to you to donate and support this station and its expenses. You can support us in many available options like archive subscriptions, our seed pack selections, or even my woodworking store. And we also even have Revolution Radio's swag at the Revolution Radio Zazzle store, in which you can get T-shirts, coffee cups, even a baby onesie. Or you can just plain donate to the cause. We cannot continue without your support, and your support is what helps pay the bills. So please, if you wish us to continue, please stop by our station support page and drop a dime on us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. We also Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning, warning.
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so old, makes you so sick that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it. Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with... Have to be ratified at a special bi-weekly meeting. Yes, I see. By a simple majority in the case of purely internal affairs. Be quiet. But by a 2/3 majority in the case of more... Be quiet. I order you to be quiet. Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left.
Yeah.
Yes, I have. Look, just a flesh wound.
I don't believe I've seen such a display of courage, skill, nerve, grace, stupidity.
I'll do you for that. Oh, what? Come here. What are you going to do, bleed on me? I'm invincible! You're a loony. The Black Knights always triumph!
Welcome one, welcome all, and it is that time for Roundtable Live here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Be rolling on till 4 a.m. in the morning Eastern Time. New ideas, different hosts every night, different subjects every night. You never know what's going to happen right here at the Roundtable Live. King Arthur has nothing on us. We're going round and round.
I just love that song these days. I don't know what it is, but I think it's ever since they used it in Thor Ragnarok, the movie. Anyways, that's the Immigrant Song by Led Zeppelin, the 2007 remaster. And we'll play a little music later on, but for now we're going to get into the show. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and we're going to do a late night roundtable. Anybody's welcome to call in. Now, I've had some success in the last 6 weeks or so pitching newcomers. You know, we've seen some people come into the roundtables that we haven't seen before. Two Feathers comes to mind. Anybody out there listening who thinks they'd like to give a shot at talking at a roundtable or on a roundtable, and anyways, you'll end up talking at the roundtable. Everybody does. Don't take it personal. It's just something roundtables do to you. But if you want to call in, my Skype handle is SeenThatTinker1, SeenThatTinker1. Or alternatively, you can call me at 864-810-1039. Daryl, you're welcome to call in as long as you have something coherent to say. And I can hear you out there thinking, Daryl. That's right. I can hear you out there thinking. Now, while we're waiting for that to happen, I'm just going to ramble on. Hey, that's another Led Zeppelin song. So, what is it, Thursday? Yeah, I lose track of time. Busy week for me this week. I had oh my God, just wall-to-wall interviews on Zoom. It's interesting because high-tech's all gone to Zoom now. Nobody uses Skype anymore. Maybe that's I don't know if that's some kind of a foreshadowing to Rev Radio, or a harbinger, if you will, of the future of digital and audio and video communication. But everybody who matters now does Zoom, and so I've been, and as luck would have it, I got the cold, and I sound like a bag of marbles. But I mean, the cold's pretty much broke. It's just kind of sitting in my chest a little bit. It's amazing the circumference on that. I'm hearing from people I know 2 provinces over, and they got it. It's like everywhere I know people in Costa Rica, they got this cold. It's interesting, the movement of infirmity, a disease. How it just sort of lands and spreads that quickly, and everybody sorts of kind of gets it. I get it more in larger cities. That's really understandable, right? I mean, you've got a lot of starting points like subways and buses and offices and elevators and all kinds of places that people are crammed together. But over here, not so much. Not so much. A man could become superstitious about how a virus spreads, thinking about it too much. But nonetheless, it spread all through the country, and everybody we know has it. And my girlfriend Rosemary and I were just getting over it. We can hear our neighbor, who's about not 1,000 meters, but about 800 meters away. You can hear him coughing at night. It's amazing how sound carries in this little natural amphitheater I live in this mountain range. It's and it is a natural amphitheater. You can talk to someone a kilometer away up here. You can if there's not a lot of background noise, like nobody's playing music or anything, you can carry on a conversation that far away. It's really, really quite amazing how sound bounces around up here. I guess it's not really that amazing, right? It's just what sound does. I hear if you're in a rock quarry or something like the Grand Canyon or something like that, it's quite extraordinary the way the sound bounces off the rock walls and stuff like that. I've never had that experience directly. Well, once in a cave when I was a kid, but we just have clear communication. So everyone's getting over this cold and trying to do with it what they can, and so on and so forth. Other than that, everything is going fantastic for me. I got to work for a spell. Looking for a chunk of work, 3 or 4 months. And I finished my last contract about, 3 months ago. Yeah, no, about 4 months ago. I don't work that much. I just work when I need money now, but I need a little bit of money to finish my project. And I'm not on any kind of schedule over here. One of the things that sort of breaks down in the tropics is, a kind of Wall Street schedule, a time-delimited schedule. You just kind of keep chipping away at something until it's done, and you don't get stressed out because at the end of the day, life's going so well. Everything else is just a bonus. Functioning business is just a bonus. You got a place to stay. You don't have a lot of stress, and good food to eat. Oh man, we got this. Somebody in my girlfriend's family had a mango tree come into bloom. So it's like people do that, right? Like when a fruit tree comes into bloom, everybody shares the fruit. So you can either go and pick it up wherever the place is. And we picked this down at my girlfriend's sister's convenience store down at the base of the mountain, just like this huge bag of mangoes. You never seen so many mangoes, man. It's like, it's like a shopping bag full of mangoes. And they don't look as pretty when they just come off a tree that hasn't been tended at all, hasn't had any chemicals put on them or anything. Fruit doesn't look nearly as pretty in real life as it does in the grocery stores in North America. I can assure you, folks, that's Hollywood fruit. And what I mean by Hollywood fruit